The detective agency where I used to work has no sign outside of its offices, no online presence or publicly listed phone number. Its client list is exclusive, wealthy, and word of mouth only. In the 2 years that I've spent employed there, no one ever buzzed at the reinforced doors without an appointment. At least, not until last Saturday. There was something disarming about how the blonde waved at the security camera and held her designer bag with both hands while she waited for me to open the door. The clients that I was used to were corporate and political elites who saw me as a disappointing dollar value on their way to something better. I was the most junior agent, which might explain why I was stuck at the office while my superiors went golfing with former clients. Maybe that was why something about the sad young woman's smile had resonated with me. And by the time that she had sat down at my desk, the biometric security system had already worked up a profile that had told me the value of her wardrobe, the likelihood that she was armed or mentally unstable, and of course, her identity. Even before the information flashed across my screen, however, I thought she looked familiar. She was Rosha Goldham, the recent widow of construction mogul Isaac Goldham. Isaac had been gunned down after hours at one of his work sites just over a week ago. "Before you ask," the blonde began, "I've already told all of this to the police. I can't blame them for not believing me. I can hardly believe it myself." I tried not to think about the 35-year age gap between Rosha and her deceased husband, or the fact that her shoes alone were worth more than what I made in a month. At the agency, we were paid on commission. If I could land Rosha Goldham as a client, I would finally be making the kind of money and connections that it took to succeed in this business. I did my best to look sympathetic as I leaned across my desk and asked how I could help. "I would tell you my name," the blonde said, "but you know that already, don't you? Just like how you know about what happened to my husband." I nodded. In situations like this, it was usually best to just let the client talk. "What you probably don't know," she went on, "is that Isaac wasn't alone. I followed him to the worksite that night, and I saw the man who killed him." I fought to keep the surprise off my face. As far as I knew, the police didn't have any leads on the Goldham case. Rosha, meanwhile, had already launched into a description of the crime. "Oh, it might sound silly to you, detective, but I went after Isaac that night because I thought he might be cheating. I mean, where else would a multimillionaire be going on a rainy Wednesday at 2 in the morning without telling his wife? At any other time, I'm sure he would have noticed me, but something had him distracted. He parked illegally a few blocks over and squeezed through a cut in the fence like he had been doing it all his life. My heels got stuck in the mud trying to keep up with them. Have you ever been in a construction zone after hours, detective?" I shook my head. "Oh, it's dark, real dark. Apart from the lights they leave on to keep away the copper thieves. There's big, shadowy piles of junk everywhere. Ragged plastic that rattles in the wind. Cords tangled on the floor like the tentacles of some monster." Rosha shuddered. Only the skeleton of the apartment complex was finished. Isaac went down some stairs on the side, toward where the basement was going to be, and that was as far as he got. What could he have been looking for down there, detective? It was nothing but a bunch of bare concrete hallways and drain pipes. Rosha drew in a deep breath. "I thought the guy was a squatter at first. I mean, he had on this long coat and wide-brimmed hat, the kind that went out of style like 100 years ago. Anyway, I saw something gleam in his hand. It was the barrel of a gun. I screamed, Isaac turned, and the stranger started blasting. I've never heard anything so loud. And in the light of the gunfire, I saw him. He was so pale that I could see the veins beneath his skin. His teeth looked longer than they should have been. like his gums had rotted away or something, and his face was. The young widow buried her face in her hands. I got some hot tea from the coffee stand and I placed it in front of her. She wrapped her hands around the mug but didn't drink. "Oh, I'm sorry," Rosha sobbed. "After the shooting finally stopped, the stranger lifted a grate and climbed down a ladder. The police told me that it leads into the drainage tunnels." Rosha took the tissue that I offered her, blew her nose, and then suddenly looked up at me with fierce, tearful blue eyes. "You know what people are saying, right? A young widow, a big fortune, an unsolved murder. It doesn't matter what any jury decides. If this ends here, I'm going to be a pariah for the rest of my life." So it wasn't about justice. It was about her. I couldn't say that I was surprised. But if Rosha Goldham wanted to pay me several $100 an hour to go stomping through the sewers in search of a pale boogeyman in a trench coat, who was I to argue? I took down a few more details and promised to contact her as soon as I had something. My next call was to Mickey Falstaff at the records office. I don't know what my superiors had on Mickey, but he could get us any documents that we needed from the local government, without the red tape. I told him that I needed some maps of the sewer system. When he asked what for, I laughed and told him that I was hunting a ghost. For some reason, Mickey didn't seem to think that that was funny. He promised to send over the plans that I had requested, but he cautioned me to compare them to the past decades' missing persons reports before I did anything else. There was a significant overlap. I mean, of course there was. The drainage tunnel access points were likely to be in rough neighborhoods and isolated areas, exactly the sorts of places where people were likely to disappear. It was so obvious that I wondered just what the hell Mickey had meant by that ominous warning of his. An hour later, I was outside the drainage tunnel entrance that was nearest to the murder scene, and geared up with thick rubber boots and multiple sources of light. I still hadn't told my employers or anybody else where I was going. I needed to find something for Rosha before some more experienced agent swooped in and stole her away from me. I was breaking half a dozen agency rules already, and if I didn't return to the surface with something, I could kiss my career goodbye. The first thing that I noticed was the smell. A putrid, greenish odor like if water could rot. I followed it to the far side of an abandoned lot, trying not to cut myself on the torn open chain link fence. There it was, a lightless, cylindrical tunnel. Somebody had built a ragged lean-to among all the garbage by its entrance. They had lit a fire in a rusty barrel too, but otherwise there was no sign of them. I switched on my headlamp and continued inside. The further that I got from the daylight, the less that I wanted to leave it behind. The walls were covered with graffiti. Somebody had smeared crap, or maybe tar, on one of them, in a manner that struck me as almost artistic. Something brushed against the back of my neck. I hoped it was a cobweb. The tunnel turned and I found myself in true darkness, alone except for the trickle of the water in the slimy culvert beside me. The shanties, trash, and other signs of human occupation began to disappear. The tunnel connected with another larger gallery where water poured from pipes into a sinister black pool below. According to my map, the place where Isaac Goldham had been shot was about 100 feet above and to my right. I began moving a little more slowly, searching for a boot print, a shell casing, or any other sign of the mysterious machine gunner. Unlike the police who had been through here earlier, I had every incentive to believe Rosha's story and take my time. But after an hour of searching, I still had nothing. I passed the access ladder leading up to Goldham's construction site, which had been sealed off by police tape even down here. I was making another pass through these surrounding tunnels when I realized that I had missed a turn. I retraced my steps to the previous intersection. but the view in all four directions was the same. Concrete, graffiti, debris, and darkness. I made a little pile of rubble and placed a coin on top of it to mark my place, and then I continued on ahead. If I didn't encounter the gallery with the black pool after several minutes, I could just return to my marker and try a different passage. That way, I was bound to find the exit tunnel eventually. Or so I thought. After 5 minutes of walking, there was no end to the first passage in sight. I turned back to try the second, but I never found my marker. As impossible as it was to believe, the shiny penny that I had placed there had somehow vanished. Who could it have been? One of the vagrants who inhabited these tunnels. A rat. I had seen several pairs of beady red eyes as I explored the tunnels, and every time I squeezed around a pile of rubbish, I hoped that I wouldn't look down and find a pair of yellowed teeth about to sink into my ankle. Without it, however, I was truly lost. I stayed that way until I stumbled across another passage, one that seemed less used than the others. Maybe it had even been part of an earlier construction that was never walled off. It wasn't where I had come from, but it might have been the path that Isaac Goldstein's murderer had taken. If so, it would also give me a way out of the sewers. The tattered piles of wood and trash that clogged it hadn't been left by the homeless. They had been dragged in by flooding water and left behind when it receded. Something skittered along the wall as I brushed aside the ragged remains of a tarp. And that's when I saw the door. An old, thick piece of bare metal with a waterproof seal. This, I was sure, didn't appear on Mickey Falstaff's maps. I rummaged in my pack for a crowbar and shimmied the seal open until I could cut the lock. I noticed uneasily that the door could be padlocked from either the inside or the outside. There was no scurry of vermin within. It was just a dank, narrow hallway. But at its end was a white, panel-frame door, like something out of an old-fashioned house. There was even an iron porch lamp above it. If I strained my ears, I thought that I could even hear music. A woman laughed. A high-pitched, hysterical sound more suited to a cocktail bar than the depths of a sewer. And that eerily ordinary-looking door began to open, and for some reason my blood ran cold. I dashed back into the passage, switched off my headlamp, and crouched behind a heap of junk listening. "Oh, where are you going, Bert?" "Oh, thought I heard somebody." A deep male voice slurred. The clack of fancy shoes echoed in the hallway. I caught a whiff of old-fashioned cologne, cigar smoke, whiskey, and gun oil. I held my breath. "Oh, there's nothing out there but the rats," another man yelled. "So you'll fit right in." There was another peal of laughter. Then came a clatter of clanging metal and a grunt of surprise. Bert had found the lock that I had cut. "What the hell?" he mumbled. I bit down a scream as something with a lot of legs crawled across my hand. "I know you're here, jackass," Bert shouted into the tunnel. "If you come out right now and don't make me go looking for you, maybe we can be friends. If not..." He trailed off and stepped out into the passage. Despite not having any source of light apart from the cracked open door behind him, the stranger navigated through the tangled junk with ease. An impossible thought occurred to me. He could see in the dark. If that was true, he would find me as soon as he turned around. I did some quick mental math, calculating the distance to the nearest bend in the tunnel, and then I made a run for it. The man called Bert spun immediately. The boom of his automatic rifle was deafening. "Oh, don't go," he shouted. "The fun's just getting started." I slipped in the slimy water and crawled on my hands and knees around the corner panting. Through the painful ringing in my ears, I could barely hear my pursuer's footsteps, Slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. And in a sense, he did. I was going to die here, I realized, gunned down in a sewer by some psycho with a machine gun. Still, I didn't have to make it easy for him. And gritting my teeth against the pain, I got to my feet and ran blindly ahead. Feeling my way along the wall for the next passage, my shin bashed against the corner of a discarded bathtub. Spiders scrambled angrily across my face as I crashed through the tattered remains of a shower curtain that had gotten tangled up in the pipes overhead. More ear-splitting gunshots lit the tunnel ahead. I had almost made it to the next intersection. The remains of a tin can exploded near my feet. Bert wolf whistled at me. He was enjoying this, I realized. Maybe he was even missing on purpose, trying to see how far he could run me before I collapsed from exhaustion. He was playing with me like some sick-minded kid torturing a bug. But the longer that I stayed alive, the greater my chances of escape would be. I faced my headlamp backward, switched it on, and was rewarded by an angry snarl as the bright beam spoiled my pursuer's night vision. I caught a glimpse of a bulky silhouette, similar to Roche's description. Fedora, pinstripe suit, a horribly pale face with dark, tiny eyes. Bert's curses were drowned out by another burst of gunfire. He had missed again, but instinct told me that my little trick had taken the joy out of the game for him. Now he was shooting to kill. I took a left and then another. I spotted daylight coming from a shoulder-wide pipe in the wall and I scrambled into it. I squeezed through until I saw an ordinary sewer grate up ahead. As I jumped up to pull myself out into the street, I took a final look back down the pipe. Although I couldn't be sure, I thought that I saw the reflection of daylight on a pair of shiny shoes. I had crawled out into a neighborhood of overgrown lots and shuttered rundown houses. The elderly woman and child on the opposite sidewalk avoided eye contact with me, and I couldn't say that I blamed them. I was filthy, wide-eyed, and cut in a dozen places. But I was alive. I had confirmed that the psycho from Roche's story was real. I even had some idea of where to find him. Still, as exclusive as the agency was, we weren't some paramilitary force. With my phone back in service, the first call I made was to the police. It was the strangest interaction that I ever had with law enforcement. A young, disbelieving officer took me to an interrogation room, where a few hours later a plainclothes detective heard my story and told me to wait some more. 2 hours passed before a middle-aged woman in a suit stalked into the room and threw the lock that I had severed onto the steel table. Trespassing, vandalism, destruction of government property. She ran down a list. Oh, and that's just a start. If you ever bring this up again, we'll prosecute you for all of it to the fullest extent of the law. Oh, those maximum penalties might not seem like much. The gray-haired woman grinned cruelly. Oh, but believe me, they add up. Oh, and I suggest you prepare a box for any possessions you still have at your agency. I've just spoken with the chief of the board. You're officially out of a job. Might be a good time to start over, huh? Maybe in another town. Someplace with better prospects. Think about it. The woman turned to go. In less than 30 seconds, she had completely taken apart my life, and I didn't even know her name. I stood, my jaw hanging open. The young officer that I had spoken with earlier was there, but the indulgent smile was gone from his face. He gripped my arm none too gently and led me out of the station. I felt like a stranger in my own city. I thought about the apartment that I had just moved into, confident that my high-paying job at the agency would cover the rent. I could last for another 2 months, maybe 3, but after that, who could say? The agency wasn't exactly going to give me a glowing reference. I pondered what the woman had said. I could pack my bags and head back to the West Coast like a dog with its tail between its legs. Or I could pay a visit to Rocha Goldham. The Goldham place was an imposing downtown structure with views of the lake. Not that there was much to see on such a dreary afternoon. Between the silence and the gray rain drumming against the windows, it reminded me of an overpriced mausoleum. And there was a semicircular desk beside the elevators where a doorman or security guard might have sat, but it was empty. I buzzed Rocha's penthouse myself and she let me up immediately. "Oh my God," she said instead of hello. "What happened to your face?" Although my exploration gear was tucked away in my backpack, the cuts and bruises from my flight through the sewers were obvious. I fidgeted with my hat and fumbled for an answer. Without my desk, my cutting-edge computer, and the reputation of the agency like to back me up, I felt surprisingly lost. And it didn't help that Rocha was so damn beautiful. She had changed into a simple, eloquent black dress. Her cheeks were flushed with emotion. I decided to begin with the most important, obvious thing that I could. I told Rocha that I believed her. I told her that I really had found something in the drainage tunnels, and although I wasn't sure what we were dealing with, I was willing to see it through to the bitter end. Her result wasn't what I had expected. She pushed away from the ultra-chic couch that she had been leaning on, crossed the room and threw her arms around me. Her lips brushed against my ear as she spoke. "He's in the closet, aiming at both of us. He told me that he would kill me if I didn't invite you up. I'm sorry." My eyes darted over Rocha's shoulder to the lightless, cracked open hall closet. A polished black shoe nudged open the door. I knew the rhythm of those footsteps, and now to my horror, I could see the rest of the stranger clearly. Beneath the harsh lights of Rocha's apartment, his skin seemed almost transparent. The hole where his nose used to be made his face appear skull-like. There was nothing weak or sickly about his eyes. However, their oversized black pupils sparkled with cruel intelligence. He wasn't a monster. He was a man just like me. And somehow that made it worse. "A long time no see, buddy," he sneered. The recession of his purplish gums made his teeth appear to be nearly twice the normal length. "Walk." He waved a revolver in our direction, and then tucked it into the pocket of his overcoat. If either of us tried to shout a warning, the other would be dead before anyone could help. And we were marched back through the lobby and out into the rain. I thought I knew now why the security guard's chair had been empty. The pale stranger led us to a back alley manhole cover and gestured at me to lift it. Everything that I had ever heard about kidnappers, murderers, and second locations flashed through my head. But I knew from experience that we would both be gunned down right here if I didn't cooperate. For the second time that day, I climbed down into the drainage tunnels. The stranger handed Rocha a clunky old-fashioned flashlight and ordered her to go after me. He dropped down behind us with feline grace. "Walk," he repeated. Rocha and I did as we were told. Apart from the distant noise of rushing water, there was nothing to mark the passage of time. It felt like forever before we had arrived at another one of those rusted, slab-like metal doors. The stranger tossed me a key and told me to open the padlock. An unsettling question gnawed at me. If the pale gunman and his accomplices came from within the metal doors, why were they sometimes padlocked from the outside? The corridor on the other side was identical to the one that I had encountered before, down to the white wood panel door and the wrought iron porch lamp. Before it had felt eerily out of place. Now it felt like if I walked through it, I would never come out again. "Oh, just couldn't let it go, could ya?" the stranger was saying. Just had to stick your nose in a little further and look where it got ya. Knock 3 times, he told Rosha. Slow. She followed his instructions, and when she saw the man on the other side, she screamed. A hideous growth covered half of his face, swelling shut his right eye, but I had no doubt that he could see well enough to use the machine gun that he was holding. A shiver ran through me. Who the hell were these disfigured men, and why were they dressed like they had walked out of the 1930s? Bert, the disfigured man smiled with empty gums. Oh, look what the cat dragged in. The boss is gonna be pleased, especially with her. He made a noise that might have been a whistle as he leered at Rosha, and then, without warning, he bashed the butt of his weapon into my nose. I went down, blood spurting from it. Puh, Bert grunted. Can't even stand a little love tap. He kicked my ribs with the tip of one of his polished shoes. Now you see why we've got the red carpet. He wasn't kidding. The stuff might have been fancy at one time, but years of dampness and overuse had taken their toll. With its unevenness and dark patches, the maroon floor looked like a roughening sea of blood. There was particle board and wallpaper on the walls, although it too was peeling away in ragged yellow straps. Something seemed off about the antique brass lamps. It took me a moment to realize that they were lit by gas. 100 years ago, this place would have been the lap of luxury, but now it looked like a badly cared for antique shop. Another kick connected with my kidney, and I decided to keep my comments about the decor to myself. Walk, Bert snarled, or better yet, crawl. He hung his fedora beside several others at the door and ran his fingers through his scabbed, greasy, half-fallen-out hair. Not wanting to give him the satisfaction, I lurched to my feet and staggered down the hallway beside Rosha, pressing a fist against the worrying pain in my side. We veered left, and I gasped at what I saw around the corner. It was a ballroom complete with chandeliers, a bandstand, and a grand staircase. Several girls in barely their dresses lounged against the bar, fear and resignation in their sunken eyes. Another overweight man in a gaudy suit lounged behind it, fiddling with a phonograph. The white tablecloths were threadbare, the plaster on the ceiling cracked. The moisture in the air made the frescoed angels appear to be crying ink-black tears. What the hell was this place? A pair of double doors swung open on the far side of the room. 2 of the girls glanced up as we passed. One seemed like she wanted to shout a warning, and the other seemed to be considering making a grab for the big man's gun while he was distracted, but decided against it. The third stared at the counter, too drunk or traumatized to react to our presence. With a shudder, I realized why they looked so familiar. All 3 could have been grown-up versions of some of the missing persons photos that I had seen earlier. A pair of double doors opened on the other side. 2 men, young, uncomfortable in their baggy outfits, and not quite so disfigured, held them open for us. Within, a group played cards around a table. The light was so dim that I couldn't make out much more than their hands and shirt sleeves. This is them, boss, Bert announced, bowing his head respectfully. The large man at the rear of the table waved a large, scarred hand. The other card players backed away into the shadows. He snapped his fingers and somebody brought him a gin and tonic on a silver plate. For a minute, there was no sound but the hammering of my heart against my chest. Then the man that they called Boss finished his long, slow sip. Let me ask you a question, he said, arms wide open and treacherously friendly. Just who do you think you're dealing with here? These psychos were going to torture us to find out what we knew and then kill us. I could see that clearly now. It might be slower or faster, more or less painful, depending on what I said. But no matter what, the outcome would be the same. Rage boiled over inside of me. "A bunch of freaks in cheap suits," I snapped. "You're something out of a bad gangster movie." Bert moved to hit me, but the boss held up a hand. "Oh, a gangster movie, huh?" he mocked. "You've ever heard of somebody called Alphonse Capone?" I glared. Chicago's most famous crime boss had been dead for nearly a century, but just about everybody in the city knew his name. "Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Let me ask you another question. You really think a guy like that with all those millions would just let himself get locked up behind bars? There have always been lookalikes willing to go to prison to protect their families, and there have been tunnels in this city since the 1860s. "So what?" I snorted. "You want me to believe that you're Al Capone?" "His great-grandson, actually. And if you're asking yourself why we're allowed to go on doing business down here, just look at what happened to Mr. Isaac Goldham, murdered by a guy with no fingerprints, no birth certificate, and absolute loyalty to me. How many others do you think we've washed over the years? Why get rid of us when we can be so useful to the powers that be?" "And the disappearances," I challenged. "Well, I mean, we gotta repopulate somehow, right?" The boss laughed. "Our connections up top take care of the rest. They keep us in good food and good liquor, even send down medicine to keep us from getting any, sicker. And in return, we do what we do best." I thought about the weird facial sores, the rotted off limbs and skin that never saw sunlight. Hadn't the real Al Capone died of syphilis? Regardless of whether there was any truth to what this psychopath was saying, the symptoms lined up. I was no doctor, but even I knew that the horrible mutations that I had seen down here could be prevented if treatment happened early enough. But did the boss and his goons know that? If somebody up above wanted to control and use these twisted underground hitmen, then making them medically dependent would be a perfect strategy. "Oh, it's been nice talking to you. We don't get many visitors down here, you know," the boss commented. "And besides, there's something, I don't know, refreshing about spilling your guts to some stranger. Confession's good for the soul, they say. And while they've got plenty of ladies and liquor down here, we ain't got no priest. They take their secrets to the grave, you know. And you will too." The boss leaned forward and grinned. From the top of his nose to the bottom of his chin, the center of his face was a single gruesome, weeping sore from which his teeth stuck out at jagged angles, like bent tombstones. He snapped his fingers again and strong hands closed around Rosha and I, pulling us apart. I fought to hang on to her, but somebody punched me in the stomach. The last things that I saw before the double doors swung shut was the look of wide-eyed terror on her face. I was dragged back through the decaying ballroom and down another hallway. I caught a glimpse of a kitchen, a storage closet, even an antiquated gymnasium. There was everything a certain type of person could want, except for sunlight. And then it was out another door, down a flight of slime-covered stairs, and into a dripping concrete corridor lit only by Bert's flashlight. The complex was enormous, part palace, part prison, part foul spiderweb that linked to every drainage tunnel in the city. I thought about the rats that I had seen before. If there were any down here, they were probably bigger and more aggressive than I could possibly imagine. Bert kicked something as he walked. It was a skull, I realized numbly, just like the plastic ones that were hung up in science classrooms or what you would see on Halloween. Only this one was real. Mold grew out from a hole in its cranium. There was another staircase ahead, one that looked far older and more dilapidated than the first. It disappeared into dark water halfway down. No matter what, I told myself I wasn't going to go down those steps. Bert set down the flashlight. A gesture passed between him and the other goon restraining me. Before I knew what was happening, Bert had pinned me by my throat against the grimy wall while the other pulled off my clothes. Laughing, they shoved me down the slick stairs and into the water. I'll never forget that feeling. It was oily, cluttered with offal and grease, and freezing cold. I stepped gingerly, knowing that one bent nail or jagged piece of glass would foil any chance that I had of escape. A rusty steel grate clanged shut behind me. Was this a prison, a torture pit? What the hell had been the point of dumping me down here without even a stitch of clothing? The beam of the flashlight grew further away. I realized with horror that they were going to leave me here, in the pitch blackness and chilling, scummy water. Even Bert's presence was better than that. I shouted after them, but they were already gone. It was the deepest darkness that I had ever known. Something splashed into the water. I wished that I had looked in the opposite direction, that I had gotten some idea of the way ahead while I could. Because now all that I could do was feel my way blindly along the stone. And there was light up ahead, the same dim, eerie gaslight that illuminated the whole complex. I didn't want to move toward it, but waiting in the foul water was even worse. The slow sloshing of my footsteps felt like some kind of countdown. I didn't understand what the round space was until another grate clanged down behind me. I was in a pit about 30 feet across, constructed of slick, rough brick. Shadowy figures looked down on me. I could hear chatter and the clinking of glasses above. As my eyes adjusted to the light, I realized that the space above had the same gaudy style as the ballroom that we had been marched through before. The faces watching were also familiar. I recognized Bert, the boss, several of the other gangsters and their victims, as well as Rosha. At some point, she had been forced to change into one of the same sheer flapper dresses that the other girls wore, complete with a feathered headband. A red velvet rope lowered into the pit. A shirtless figure scrambled down it. He had the same sores and wide, light-deprived pupils as the others, but he was barely more than a teenager. My stomach turned at the thought that kids grew up down here, surrounded by decadence, decay, and violence. They became the next generation of killers. And that was why I hadn't been gunned down on sight. They had been saving me, I realized, to serve in this boy's initiation ritual. He spat, flexed, and cracked his neck. Somebody tossed a pair of switchblades into the ankle-deep water. "Time for your first blood, Joey." The boss's voice rumbled down from on high. "Show us his guts in you," he said to me. "If you win, you and your girl can walk out of here. No strings attached. How's that for a deal?" As an answer, I stooped, snatched the knife, and held it at the ready. The boy kicked his up and caught it with a flourish. He puffed his chest out at me, trying to look intimidating, but the uncertainty in his eyes was obvious. His muscular build had made him look older than he was. Now that we were face to face, I was sure that he couldn't have been more than 14 years old. Now, I was no Navy SEAL, but the agency didn't hire anyone who couldn't handle themselves in a fight. The kid lunged, but he didn't overextend. Somebody had trained him well. He kicked water at my face before his next cut, but the motion threw him off balance. I dived in and shoulder tackled him while he still had one hand in the air. The boy tried to stab downward into my shoulder, but the blade fell from his hands and clattered away. The room echoed with boos and cheers. I lifted my knife on high and the boy cringed. I hesitated, and that was all the advantage that he needed. He elbowed the side of my head and rolled me. He pinned my wrist, bashing it again and again into the ground until I let go of my only weapon. His strong, bone-white fingers gripped my throat. As I struggled to break free, he headbutted me, and then leaned in and whispered into my ear, "Play dead. Even if you win, they'll shoot you anyway." It sounded much less like a lie than what the boss had told me. The boy pretended to strangle me and I played along. My nose was already bleeding, and the blood in the water made the lie look more real than it might have otherwise. "Oh, that was quick," Bert complained. From where I floated with my eyes shut tight, I could hear the clunking of his enormous antique gun. "Oh, say boss, how about I light him up a little bit? That guy had me running all over the city." "Save it," the boss cut in. "I need you to go take out this law student up by Devon Avenue. She's been asking some ugly questions about where the public works money goes." Still grumbling, Bert lumbered off. "That was some fast thinking, Joey. I was afraid that he had you for a minute." The boy's footsteps splashed as he walked to the pit wall and scrambled back up the velvet rope. Rosha was crying. "Flush him," the boss sighed. Another grate screeched open. Water flooded into the pit, lifting me up and carrying me along with it. I was swept down a second filthy passage. Clumps of algae, discarded cans, and worse things brushed against me as I passed. The light at the end of the tunnel was getting further and further away. I clenched my teeth to keep from crying out as I bumped against a pile of something jagged. I couldn't see what this stuff was, but it was everywhere, piled so thick and tall that water could barely slip through. As something brushed against my bare foot, I reached out and gripped it, afraid that it was some kind of horrible underground creature. But it was only the leg of the pants that I had been wearing earlier. The rest of my possessions followed behind. They had been disposed of right along with me, and among them was my waterproof headlamp. I switched it on and finally realized what the water had pressed me up against. Human bones, an entire wall of them, clotted with the ragged remnants of clothes and belongings. Although some were adult, the majority were the malformed remains of those younger, the unwanted, I suppose, of the human monsters upstairs. At the top of the hideous mound, there was another grate. I climbed hand over hand, trying not to think about what supported me, or how long it would be able to hold my weight. The grate above was locked, of course it was. I had avoided a quick death by gunfire only to earn a longer, far more terrible one of starvation in the dark. There was another splash in the water down below, similar to the one that I had heard earlier. I angled my headlamp down. Half a dozen blind, red eyes stared back at me. Maybe my death wasn't as far away as I had thought. Just as I had feared, they were the biggest rats that I had ever seen. Their lips peeled back when they saw me. They climbed hungrily and without a hint of fear, given the pile around them. I figured they had been surviving on human flesh for quite some time now. I kicked at the nearest one. It dodged easily, leapt, and sank its fangs into my leg. It was the size of a cat, its black fur sleek and oily beneath my fingers as I fought to pull it away. Another sprang onto my back, its tiny claws scratching at my bare shoulder as it struggled to get closer to my neck. Its wormy tail was at least a foot long. Loose bones slipped beneath my feet, splashing into the water below. I was losing my balance, and more rats were already scurrying up the pile of bones. "Hit him in the eyes," a voice hissed from above me. It was the boy, Joey. "They don't like that." It wasn't as easy as he had made it sound, but it worked. While I swatted away the vermin, Joey unlocked the grate. After scrambling through and slamming it down on the gnashing teeth below, I asked him why he was helping me. "The boss says we're better off down here, where we can do what we want and take what we want. He says the ones above have made themselves weak through too much easy living. But I've been outside once with Bert, back when I was barely old enough to walk. I want that, not this. If I can get you out of here, will you help me?" And dripping and shaken, I nodded. I had one condition, however. We weren't leaving without Rosha. In the wavering light of my headlamp, I saw Joey grit his teeth. Oh, those guys' brains might be rotten from the sickness and too much booze, but they're not dumb. I used Bert's keys to get out of here, and it won't be long before he notices that they're gone. If I waltz back in there, he'll gut me without a second thought. It's too dangerous. I shook my head. I was going back for her, I told him, with or without his help. My heart raced. If he called my bluff and left me alone in this maze of dripping tunnels, I was a dead man. The pale boy sighed. He gestured for me to follow him. We went up a ladder and through a narrow, cobwebby shaft until he reached another one of those solid steel doors. He pressed his ear against it and listened. The clack of the key turning in the lock was horrifically loud. Its hinges creaked beneath so much heavy metal. We stuck our heads into another gas-lit hallway. It looked empty. Heaven, drunken piano notes echoed up from the ballroom. "Come on," Joey murmured. "They keep the girls down here." The hallway that he had led me to was lined with bolted, scratched-up doors. Somebody was weeping inside one of them. "My ma was locked up in one of these rooms almost all her life," Joey was saying. "And then one day she was just gone. Outlived her usefulness," the boss said. And then he laughed. "Your girl will be in that one at the end of the hall, if the boss isn't with her already." I ran to the last door on the left and unbolted it. Rosha looked up from where she sat in the corner of the bed, a trembling glass of whiskey in her hand. Pressing a finger to my lips, I gestured toward the hallway. As she sprang to her feet, I smelled cigarette smoke and heard the click of a pistol hammer being pulled back. "Every time a door opens in this place, I get a buzz down in my office," the boss sneered. "Or didn't you know?" The boss and two of his pearly-skinned goons stood to my right. Bert was on my left, his enormous Tommy gun in hand. There was no sign of Joey. "How the hell did you get out of that pit?" the boss chuckled. "You know what, I don't want to know. Nice seeing yous." He squeezed the trigger. I flung myself back through the door of Roche's cell. Two splintered craters appeared in it where I had been standing seconds before, and then I noticed the smoke. "What's that?" the boss shouted. "Smells like something's on fire. Bert, go see what's burning. I'll take care of these two." Rosha and I crouched behind the tattered stained mattress. There was nowhere else to take cover. Had Joey set the blaze as a distraction? If so, I hoped he knew what he was doing. The boss, meanwhile, didn't seem to be in any hurry. He strode slowly into the room, firing a lazy shot at our hiding place. Clouds of dust and feathers flew up from where the bullet had ripped through the cloth. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, I felt myself giving up. Here I was, hundreds of feet beneath the city that I thought I knew so well, about to be murdered by some diseased, rotted gangsters who still lived like it was the 1930s. The boss's bulk was blocking the door. He had 3 shots left in his revolver. There was no way out of this. No way that we were leaving this squalid little room alive. Before I knew what was happening, Rosha had sprung to her feet and gripped the brass table lamp and flung it at the boss's head. The impact barely staggered him, but it was enough. Rosha and I darted past and out the door before he could reestablish his aim. We started coughing almost immediately. Whether it was due to the confined space or the dusty filth of what was burning, I wasn't sure, but the air was thick with cloying smoke. Joey waved at us through the haze, indicating a way out. The boss's next 2 shots went wide as we ran to him. I could hear the big man cursing and shouting behind us, the chamber of his revolver nearly empty. My skin seemed to crackle in the heat. I pressed the cloth of my wet shirt over my face. I was sweating more than I ever had in my life, and with each passing second it was getting harder and harder to breathe. The staircase that we took crumbled into embers as we sprinted up it. From the rubbery odor in the air, the soles of my shoes were beginning to melt. The lights went out. Somebody had shut off the gas that powered the place's antique lighting. The only illumination now was the orange glow of distant flames. The hallway ahead ended in a T. Wails, screams, and a burst of gunfire reverberated from the left. Our little group veered right. Joey led us past a slime-covered empty swimming pool and through the remains of what appeared to have once been a bowling alley. Its peeling plaster now hung like Spanish moss from the ceiling. They really had given themselves every luxury down here, and now it was all going up in flames. I grunted in pain as my toes bashed against a table leg. With the fire so far away, it was nearly impossible to see. And then Joey opened a door and the fire roared in. The boy sprung back with a scream. I could sense him beginning to panic. The fire had changed course and burnt up his plans along with the gaudy wallpaper. "You got this," I reminded him. "You know all the ways out of here, and we're going to get to one before they find us." Joey looked at the wickedly curling flames in front of us and nodded. He didn't look convinced. We doubled back, and although we hadn't seen or heard anyone, I found myself still scanning the dark corners for Bert. The hallway where we had heard the gunfire was now suspiciously empty. As we crept down it, I knew that I would feel this hellish heat and see this awful orange glow in my nightmares until the day that I died. The smoke grew thicker every second until at last, we were in front of a thick metal door. The same one that we had come in through, I realized. Joey's fingers shook as he fiddled with the keys. "It's not working," he coughed. "Birdie must have changed the locks." The fire was here now, creeping around the corner like a living thing. "Give me those." Rosha grunted through the cloth that she held over her face. The padlock gave in on her second try. Joey must have been too tense to realize that he had been using the wrong key, but it didn't matter now. We rushed out into the damp but cool air of the drainage tunnels, and didn't wait around to see if anyone followed. I switched on my headlamp and did my best to decipher a route back to the surface. "Do you think they escaped through one of the other exits?" Rosha asked. Joey shrugged. "I don't know. The boss and the rest of them can burn for all I care. To think that I used to look up to them, that I wanted to be like them." The boy trailed off sickened. I tried to slow my heaving breaths, swept the beam of my headlamp from side to side, and I listened for footsteps that never came. 4 minutes later, we were standing beneath the rainy, light-polluted night sky, so happy that we could have kissed the concrete. Gawking at the bright lights and tall buildings, Joey muttered that he needed some place to lay low for a while. He was an undocumented miner, and even after a lifetime underground, he could guess how difficult that would make life up here on the surface. Rosha wanted to go straight to the authorities. I thought about the gray-haired woman who had threatened me earlier and told her that that probably wasn't a good idea. "There's a hotel used by the elite in town," Rosha told us. "A place with no cameras where nobody checks IDs, and they forget your face the moment that you're through the door. I'll get us a room and give you the number. But right now you need to get yourself shots for rabies, tetanus, and a dozen other things. Go see a doctor and don't worry. I can take care of the kid." "I'm not just some kid, you know," Joey protested. "I saved both your asses back there and you'd better not forget it." We told him that we wouldn't. A haze of smoke from the underground blaze filled the rainy air. In the distance, I heard the wail of sirens. If we didn't want to answer some very uncomfortable questions, it was time to disappear. Rosha made a phone call, then gave me an address and a room number. As I watched her and Joey walk off into the night, I glanced uneasily over my shoulder at the mouth of the drainage tunnel. For some reason, I couldn't help but feel like I was making a terrible mistake. There was a heap of old magazines and newspapers in the lobby of the dingy 24-hour clinic that I had visited, and a few of them contained articles about Isaac Goldham's murder. A multimillionaire, a real estate developer. He had gotten into a dispute with the local government over his next build site, and while the official causes were blurry, I knew the true reason. The structure was going to be built right on top of the complex that Rosha and I had escaped from. There was a possibility that the construction would have brought to light the horror beneath our feet. I thought about all the whistleblowers and reformers who had died in this city under mysterious circumstances, and I felt a shiver run up my spine. How many of them had seen the same sight in their final moments? A man with pearly white skin and a half-rotten face, flexing a knife, a garrote, or automatic weapon in his gloved hands. A living ghost who couldn't be traced. The perfect assassin for those in power. With my doctor visit complete, I hurried to the hotel address. Just as Rosha had said, it was clearly a high-end place, but I never would have guessed its function from the outside. The desk clerk didn't look up when I crossed the lobby. My heart raced while I waited for the elevator to reach the 4th floor. I hadn't realized how much in a single day these people had come to mean to me. Maybe right now Rosha was drying her hair after showering off the filth of such a nightmarish day. Maybe the kid Joey was sitting transfixed in front of the color television. 414, that was their room number. But as the elevator doors opened, I realized that its door was standing open. There's no need to describe what I found on the other side. It was easy enough to imagine. A hotel for the elites, Rosha had said. And maybe the desk worker was more observant than he had appeared. Maybe the employers of those psychos had told their contacts to keep an eye out for a slim blonde woman and a buff, pale teenager. Maybe just as the woman in the police station had warned, no place in this city was safe for someone who knew what I knew. I could have chosen to stay and fight, but I didn't. The names involved are made up, but now, decades later, even the real ones have probably been forgotten. I retreated to the West Coast into calmer line of work, but I never forgot those 2 insane days. I never overcame the fear that one day the closet door will creak open and I'll find myself looking up at one of the boss's descendants, his mouth stretched wide in a syphilis grin. And today's episode is sponsored by Rocket Money. One thing I've been trying to get better about lately is actually knowing where my money goes. It's amazing how easy it is to lose track of subscriptions or little purchases that don't seem like much until they all add up. And that's where Rocket Money has been really helpful. It puts all of your checking, savings, loans, and investments into one dashboard, so you can actually see the full picture instead of bouncing between a bunch of different apps. It also tracks your subscriptions and it can help you cancel the ones you don't want with just a few taps. In fact, Rocket Money has helped users save over $880 million in canceled subscriptions. You can also set budgets, create saving goals, and get alerts for things like large purchases or upcoming bills. And users who create a financial goal with Rocket Money save over $70 on average within the first 30 days. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel unwanted subscriptions and monitors your spending and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Let Rocket Money help you reach your financial goals faster. Join at rocketmoney.com/Mr. Krabs. That's rocketmoney.com/Mr. Krabs. rocketmoney.com/Mr. Krabs. What exactly are we looking for, Captain? The question was asked by Company First Sergeant Jacobs as we marched through a forest deep in southern Germany. Looking up from the map that I was holding, I stared at Jacobs and I shook my head before looking back down at the map. Jacobs must have assumed it meant that I wasn't at liberty to tell him and simply walked away to do other duties. However, truth be told, I didn't know the answer either. The night before at the battalion command post, The old man had told me that I was to take my company and sweep the area for German forces. For the past few days, aerial reconnaissance noted large numbers of enemy trucks driving along uncharted roads in this sector, and so High Command wanted to find out where they were heading to. The forest had no major population centers or positions of known strategic importance, so it seemed strange to have so much activity there. Was there an operations base there, where the remnants of the German military could stockpile weapons and supplies for future resistance? Was there a POW camp or maybe one of those terrible prisoner camps being discovered all over Germany? Nobody really knew, and it was up to me and my company to find out. Moving through the forest, my company navigated through the trees and kept an eye out for any enemy activity. Despite the war nearing its end, we knew that we had to keep alert. There were still some die-hard units in place like this, so it was never good to let your guard down in case we encountered them. With reports of trucks rolling around this area, I felt that such units were most likely present. And luckily for us, most of the morning was uneventful. Our search through the area found nothing but trees and rock. After resting at noon in order to eat, we soon continued our search, moving along the same direction until the lead platoon encountered a trail. Following this trail, we soon saw 2 trucks halted in the middle of the path. Meanwhile, dead German soldiers could be seen in and around the vehicles. Cautiously approaching the trucks, the leading squad quickly made sure that it was clear before securing the surrounding area. I then ordered the company to hold while me, Jacobs, my XO, and the platoon commanders inspected the trucks and the deceased German soldiers surrounding it. Were they ambushed? Second Lieutenant Henry Arnold, commander of 3rd Platoon, asked as he stared at the trucks. To our surprise, the vehicles had various damage on their cabins and their truck beds. To me, it seemed as if somebody took an axe and started swinging heavy blows on the trucks. It must have been some powerful man who did it. However, as the metal in the cabins was heavily shredded. That seems like it. The question now is, who did it? My XO, First Lieutenant Daniel Jenkins, replied, as he inspected the dead men on and around the trucks. Like the vehicles, they seemed to have been attacked by an axe-wielding assailant, as they had limbs sliced off. It was an awful sight, and many of the men who were battle-hardened veterans of countless battles had to look away from the terrible carnage. There aren't any resistance groups here, Second Lieutenant Henry Merrill said. I nodded at this, and I remembered the briefing we had at battalion headquarters a few days before. The area that we were in was deep in Germany, and the people were either loyal or too afraid to resist. Perhaps they were on their way to surrender to us and were ambushed by the die-hard forces. I saw Sergeant Jacobs shake his head at this. Oh, I doubt it, sir. Based on the direction their trucks are pointing, they would have been heading away from our lines and not towards it. Then who could have done this and why? Jenkins asked, but nobody could answer. Instead, we stared at the gruesome sight, confused and worried. Reporting what we encountered to battalion headquarters, I told them that we were unable to find out who was responsible for the destruction of the 2 German trucks and the death of its occupants. A sweep around the area found no signs of those who attacked them. The only sign that a battle had occurred was from the bullet casings that the Germans fired and their dead bodies. Acknowledging the information, headquarters told us to be on high alert and to continue our search around the area. With that, I ordered the company to follow the trail and to keep their eyes open for any hostile activity. I didn't want any of my men to meet the same fate as the Germans on the trucks had. However, as we marched along the trail, the sight of the dead German soldiers and the unknown reasons behind their deaths continued to plague my mind. For some reason, I wanted to turn back to the safety of our lines, but with no good reason to do so, I knew that we had to continue. The sight of 2 truckloads of German soldiers found dead on a trail would not ease the old man's anger at me if I told him I chickened out and failed to meet my objective. And the next hour of the march was without excitement, as we went along the trail and encountered nothing but the noise of the forest. Eventually though, 3rd Platoon, which was at the head of the company, reported to have found a heavily fortified mine entrance. Wasting no time, I quickly moved forward and joined Arnold, as he and his platoon laid prone in a depression that was covered with thick underbrush. From there I could see flat open ground which was covered with barbed wire, and it had a concrete bunker covering it. Next to the bunker was a gun emplacement for a German 88. Meanwhile, behind the bunker were 2 watchtowers that guarded the concrete entrance that led to a tunnel on the side of a mountain. "The trail leads all the way there, sir," Arnold said before frowning. "It seems to be heavily defended, but there's something that you should know, sir." Before he could continue, I suddenly saw what he was most likely trying to tell me about. Staring through my field glasses, I saw a body laying on the ground, unmoving and seemingly dead. Then I noticed other bodies, around a dozen of them all over the enemy position. It seemed that the garrison there had already been taken out. Looking away and turning towards Arnold, I stared at him with disbelief. Seeing my expression, he must have known that I already saw the dead German soldiers. "Have you seen any sign of activity in those positions?" I eventually asked. "None, sir," Arnold said. "Me and the platoon sergeant observed the bunker, the gun emplacement, and those watchtowers, but saw no Germans aside from that dead. It could be a trap, but I'm not sure. If it is, it's one gruesome way to draw us in." I nodded. The terrain in front of the bunker was a killing ground. If we crossed, we would be completely exposed. If this was indeed a trap, then the Germans could fire at us from hidden positions that we haven't seen yet. But was it really a trap? It seemed strange for the enemy to bait us using dead men. It just didn't seem right. Maybe it wasn't a trap after all. Maybe this was the work of the same assailants that ambushed the 2 trucks earlier. That thought concerned me a lot. If it was the work of that unknown party, why haven't they made contact with us yet? Did it mean that they were hostile to both the Germans and us? We didn't know the answer, but we had to find out. To do that, however, we had to secure the enemy position ahead of us, and with that, I prepared the company to advance. The first to go forward would be 3rd Platoon. I ordered them to move up the trail and head towards the enemy bunker. As they advanced, the rest of the company would cover them, watching both the enemy fortifications and the high ground behind it, just in case there were enemy positions there. If they encountered heavy enemy fire, they were to turn back and regroup. As it turned out, their advance was met with no resistance. Eventually, they had reached the German positions, cleared and secured it, before signaling to us that it was safe for the rest of the company to join them. Reaching the position, I immediately inspected the dead German soldiers, and I looked down with dread to see that they had similar injuries to those from the ambush trucks. Dried blood could be found everywhere, bullet cases littered the ground, and severed limbs were scattered all over the place. It was an all too familiar sight. There was no doubt in my mind that they too were attacked by the same unknown party. And the question now was, who were they, and where were they now? Radioing headquarters, I reported our position to them and told them what we found so far. In my conversation with the commander, I noticed that the old man seemed to be more interested in news of us finding a mine than the report that unknown parties had attacked and killed the German garrison that guarded its entrance. His excitement regarding the former was probably because of the treasures that German mines seemingly held. Over the past month, Allied units had been finding mines that German authorities used as storage areas. Sometimes they used them to stockpile weapons and supplies. Other times they used them to hide their spoils of war. The old man was excited to find out what we had stumbled upon. Because of that, he ordered me to inspect the mine, while he and another company from the battalion moved towards our location. He wanted the inside of the mine inspected and secured by the time that he had arrived. I would have preferred not to bring my men inside. We weren't sure who was still down that mine, and if we ended up in a fight, a battle in confined and dark areas would be a nightmare. But I had orders to follow, and I didn't want to be on the old man's bad side once he had arrived. All I could do now was hope that whoever killed the Germans out here were friendly to us, and had also eliminated any Germans inside of the mine. Leading 2nd and 3rd platoon into the mine, I left 1st platoon and the weapons platoon under the command of Jenkins outside. They were to guard the tunnel entrance in case any German forces suddenly arrived and trapped us inside. Going through the tunnel, we saw more bodies on the ground. Some of them had been stabbed and others had limbs cut off. As I observed the bodies all over the tunnel, I couldn't help but wonder if they died trying to head into the mine or trying to get out of it. Managing to reach the end of the tunnel without incident, we found a large elevator platform. Just like other parts of this place, its floor was covered with dried blood. After inspecting the elevator to make sure that it was safe, a squad with the 2nd platoon commander, 2nd Lieutenant Justin Trevor, was lowered down. After a few minutes, the platform rose back with one of his men, who said that it was safe to go down and that I would be amazed to see what they found. Curious, I inquired what they saw down there. "It's some kind of factory, sir." "What kind of factory?" I asked, as we rode the platforms down. "Rockets, Captain," he said, scratching his head. "Like the ones they've been throwing at London, except they're bigger. They remind me of the time we went to New York to board the ship across the Atlantic." The rockets were indeed bigger. The underground room itself was huge. It was like an aircraft hangar deep under a mountain. Somehow the Germans had managed to carve out a gigantic room this far beneath the ground. Upon my initial inspection, the distance between the floor and ceiling was probably around 200 feet. All around this gigantic area were various rockets of various sizes, with some lying down and some standing up. This was indeed a factory for German rockets. However, just like above, dead bodies and bullet cases also covered the place. But unlike above, the dead were not just soldiers. Instead, it was a combination of soldiers and civilians, with the latter most likely being the technicians and laborers who worked in this facility. The presence of death within the mine itself told me that the unknown assailants had gotten in here too. Whether they were still in here or not, I wasn't sure, but the sight of so many dead was concerning. With us still not knowing what their intentions were, I ordered the men to keep their eyes open and to be careful at every corner. For all we knew, they might not be targeting just the Germans. As we began to search the area, I couldn't help but inspect some of the rockets that were held there. There were rockets of various sizes, and I was amazed how the Germans were able to produce these large machines in such quantities. Clearly, their underground industry and infrastructure was far greater than what we thought. One of the smaller rockets in there was over 40 feet long and had a diameter of over 5 feet. Upon approaching one, I recognized them as the V2. It looked exactly just like the ones in the photographs the battalion S2 had showed us. And the other rockets, though, I could not recognize, but they were definitely bigger than the V2s. As we moved around the hangar and checked each rocket, it seemed like some of them were supposed to fit on top of one another. Now, I was no expert when it came to rockets, but it was obvious that numerous big rockets stacked together could extend the range of the last rocket on the stack. This made me wonder if the Germans had been developing a weapon that could hit further into Britain. Maybe they were even developing one that could hit America. Staring at the size of the rockets and their engines, I didn't think it was outside the realm of possibility. Looking around even more, I noticed a couple of strange rockets that stuck out from the rest. The first one was a small rocket around 40 feet long. This rocket had a small pair of wings that ran along its length, while at the front there was a canopy. Clearly this one was meant to be piloted. The thought of somebody riding a vehicle as dangerous as a rocket astonished me, and I wondered what unlucky pilot got assigned such a frightening job. The second strange-looking rocket was one that had a strange shape, one that made it resemble a bell and stood on 4 pylons that acted as its legs. Standing at around 60 feet in height and having a diameter of around 20 feet, it was definitely one of the bigger rockets there. Inspecting it, I noticed that unlike the others, it had no engines on it. Instead, the bottom was flat and there seemed to be no place for any of the rocket engines to be placed on. Another strange thing about them was that they had these large ramps on their side that led to the interior. Glancing inside, I could see that there were seats and controls in there, just like a cockpit. Seeing that made me wonder if what I was looking at was a rocket, since I assumed that those areas were supposed to be where the fuel was and not a cockpit. I was tempted to go inside and look around more, but I decided against it. There could be booby traps that could destroy the equipment and harm it. So I decided to leave it alone and let the engineers figure it out when they get their hands on it. There were 2 of the bell-shaped rockets in the hangar, with one seeming to have some form of major damage, while the other had a few dents on its hull, but it was largely intact. This latter rocket seemed to have been undergoing maintenance, however, since many of its panels were removed, while its machinery were littered all around it. As I continued to explore the hangar, one of the soldiers from 3rd Platoon approached me and said that Lieutenant Arnold had requested my presence. Earlier, I had ordered 3rd Platoon to further explore the facility and search the other rooms there, while 2nd Platoon remained at the hangar, clearing it and doing the best they could to pile the German dead to one corner of the room. After looking around the vast facility, it seemed that Arnold and his platoon had found something important. Taking a stairwell at the side of the hangar, the 3rd Platoon man led me up a few flights of stairs until we had made it to a room. In the room, Arnold stood there waiting. The room that he was in was filled with cabinets and tables covered with folders and documents. Gesturing to one of the tables, I looked to where Arnold was pointing and was impressed by what I saw. Schematics from one of the rockets was there, laid out right in front of us. I quickly realized that he had stumbled upon the blueprints and technical papers regarding the rockets being built in this underground facility. Smiling, I gave Arnold a pat on the back, knowing his find would be helpful for the engineers who would be studying the rockets that we found here. Sure, having the finished product was nice, but with these documents, the engineers at home would not only learn how to use the rockets, but also learn how to reproduce them without having to tear apart and study the ones in the hangar below. Looking around the room and seeing what else we could find, I noticed a panel of windows off to one corner. Glancing out of it, I realized that it offered a complete view of the hangar area below. After watching 2nd Platoon move around and work, I then turned my attention away from the window and stared at some of the documents on a nearby table. I had some ability in speaking and reading the German language, thanks to a childhood friend of mine who was the son of a German immigrant, so I decided to pick up one of the papers and see what was written. Military encounters with out-of-Earth beings. This piqued my interest. Out-of-Earth beings, what do they mean by that? Wanting to learn more, I continued to read. August 1943. First encounter with Die Glock. August 1943. First encounter with Die Glocke. A patrolling Mi-109 from a fighter squadron based in France sighted a bell-shaped object flying near Paris. An attempt to intercept was made, but the object increased speed and altitude, preventing the Mi-109 from catching up. Said flying object was later classified as Die Glocken. This made me think for a second. The bell, Die Glocke in German. Did this mean the bell-looking rocket at the hangar? I believed that it did. December 1943. Second encounter with Die Glocke. A Glocke was flying south of Berlin, spotted by local anti-aircraft batteries. January 1944. Third encounter. During the A-9 manned rocket suborbital test flight test, the pilot of the rocket reported sighting a Glocke approach and trail him. This sighting reveals that Die Glocke is capable of outer space flight. Said spacecraft continued to trail the A-9 until the latter re-entered the atmosphere. February 1944. Fourth encounter with Die Glocke and the sighting of a mothership spacecraft. During the second suborbital test flight, the test pilot reported seeing a disc-shaped spacecraft in the distance. From this object, which would later be labeled as a mothership, he sighted a Glocke exit before moving towards them. The Glocke would trail the A-9 until the latter re-entered the atmosphere. March 1944. Fifth encounter with Die Glocke and the destruction of an A-9 manned rocket. During the A-9's first operational mission, which was to conduct a photo reconnaissance of Washington, D.C., the manned rocket was intercepted by a Glocke at an altitude of 390 kilometers above the Atlantic Ocean. The pilot reported seeing a bright flash of light emitting from Die Glocken before all contact and data from the A-9 was lost. It was later determined that the loss of the rocket was due to an attack from Die Glocken through an unidentified weapon. After this incident, military high command has labeled these entities in orbit above the planet as hostiles. May 1944. The sixth encounter and the shoot-down of one by a Ju-88R-1. After detecting an unidentified object flying over Nuremberg by radar facilities in the area, one Ju-88R was dispatched to intercept the flying object. The Ju located the object flying low and engaged it. After successfully scoring hits, the object crashed in the middle of the field. Ground forces would later recover the object and discover the deceased remains of out-of-Earth beings inside. The object itself would be recovered, identified as a Glocken, and taken to an underground facility for study. July 1944, Operation Jaeger. After careful preparations, military forces conducted a strike against the orbiting mothership. This task was given to the 1st Outer Space Squadron. 6 A-9 manned rockets, each armed with a single radio-guided missile, and each stacked atop their own A-10 and A-11 rockets, were launched to intercept the mothership spacecraft. Upon reaching orbit, the A-9s conducted course corrections in order to approach the out-of-Earth spacecraft and get within missile range. And during the approach, a Bell exited the mothership and approached the A-9s. Through the use of a heat weapon, it managed to destroy 2 of them, before being destroyed by 2 radio-guided missiles from 2 of the 4 remaining A-9s. With 2 missiles left available, 2 A-9s pressed the attack and got within range. They fired and successfully damaged the mothership. Reports from the pilots state the damage must have been substantial, as they saw 2 of the Bells vacate the spacecraft and enter the atmosphere. One of them that evacuated the mothership was found landing in southern Germany. An infantry battalion was garrisoned in the area and quickly surrounded the Bell. After a brief engagement, the battalion had managed to kill 2 out-of-earth beings and knock unconscious 2 others. They, along with the bell, which was lightly damaged from the fighting, were brought to an underground facility for observation and study. After reading this, I was left dumbfounded. Was all that I read true? It seemed too outrageous to be. Yet remembering the bell-shaped rockets in the hangar, I began to wonder if there was some truth to this document. But if this was indeed true, then where were these out-of-earth beings that the Germans had claimed to have captured? Were they being held in this facility? This thought nearly made my heart skip a beat. If they were indeed being held here, then where were they contained? And then another thought came into my mind. Were they even still contained? Remembering the dead bodies and the gruesome ways that they were killed, I assumed that they could have been the work of these beings. I then realized that we could be trapped here with creatures far stronger than us. At that moment, I was lost. I didn't know if I should believe the document or throw it away as rubbish. I was in the middle of debating with myself about that topic when Arnold's platoon sergeant came racing up the stairs. "Sir," he said to Arnold before turning to me. "Captain." He then paused, catching his breath before continuing. "We found something you both need to check out." Shoving the document into my pocket, I nodded and ordered the sergeant to lead the way. Moving down and going through long dark halls, the sergeant brought us deeper and deeper into the facility. With each hall, the occasional dead German could be found. Eventually, we reached a hallway where 2 3rd platoon soldiers stood at the entrance. Laying on the floor next to them were 2 dead German soldiers, whose arms were cut off from their torso. Ushering us in, the platoon sergeant waited for me and Arnold to enter before following us. Inside the room were 2 large metal doors, both of which were ajar. Behind each door was a large metal bed that had multiple chains attached to it. It didn't take long for me to realize that it was some kind of holding cell. Moving towards the closest cell, I noticed that the metal door was at least 5 inches thick. Yet despite its thickness, it was clearly heavily damaged. Dents on the metal could clearly be seen, as if somebody had been punching it. Not only that, but the door had a hole where the large mechanical lock should have been. Looking around, I found the heavy lock laying on the other side of the room, as if it had been pushed off. I frowned upon seeing that. Something from inside must have applied enough force to remove the lock. Whatever was in there, I knew that it couldn't have been human. No man could have had the strength to do that. With no signs of explosives being used, it was obvious that sheer natural strength had kicked the lock off the door. Turning my attention to the other cell, I noticed that its door also had dents. However, the lock on that one was intact, although unlocked. My assumption at the time was that whatever was contained in the first cell, it had gotten out and freed the one in the other cell. After seeing the damage on the metal doors and noting the chains on the bed, I quickly remembered what I had read earlier in the German document. This must be where the Germans kept the creatures they captured from the spacecraft. Realizing that there was indeed truth to what was written on that paper, a sense of urgency suddenly filled me. Lurking in this mine or possibly in the surrounding forest were creatures not from this planet. At that point, I knew that we were in danger. Turning away from the cells, I quickly stomped back towards the hallway, as Arnold followed close behind. I told him about the paper I read and the possibility that Germans were killed by the creatures that they kept in here. I then ordered him to gather his platoon and meet me by the elevator platform. I wasn't sure if he believed what I said, but he gave no questions. With that, he and his platoon sergeant, along with the 2 members of the platoon that were already there, went to find the rest of his men. Meanwhile, I took a different route and began to make my way back to the large hangar area. There was a threat in this mine and the whole sector. I knew that I had to get my men out of the facility in case one or both of the creatures was still in here. I also knew that I needed to contact the battalion commander and tell him about the possibility of a being from outer space lurking in the forest, waiting to ambush them like the 2 German trucks from before. As I made my way through the maze of hallways, the distinct sound of gunfire immediately halted me. It was a continuous burst, and I identified it as the sound of a Thompson submachine gun. One of my men was firing at something. Raising my rifle, I made sure that it was loaded and ready to go, and then taking a step forward, I cautiously navigated the hallways, being careful with each corner and making sure that there was nothing there to ambush me. Eventually, I began to hear voices as I neared a turn towards another hallway. Recognizing the voice, I felt some relief knowing that it came from First Sergeant Jacobs. However, the relief quickly turned into panic as I realized what he was saying. "Come on," I heard him shout. "Move faster, it's gaining on us." Rushing forward and turning the corner, I looked on to see 3 of my men heading towards my direction. A terrified expression could be seen on their faces as they ran for their lives. Behind the 3 was Sergeant Jacobs, who held his ground and fired his submachine gun at something at the other end of the hallway. Since the lighting there was dark, it was hard to tell what exactly he was trying to hit. But as he turned around to fall back, a creature that I've never seen before soon emerged from the darkness. It was strange and it was terrifying. The creature was nothing what I had expected a being from space would have looked like. I had read a couple of science fiction comics before the war, and every single time they showed creatures from other planets, they always looked human. However, what we had encountered in the facility was far from human. At first glance, the creature looked similar to a spider, a very large spider that towered over an average man. But as it got closer, I noticed that although its silhouette was similar to a spider, its features were nothing like the small creatures here on Earth. Its body was nothing but a large black eye with a glowing red pupil. It was frightening and unblinking, and I watched as it stared at Jacobs with murderous intent. Protruding from that eye were 8 legs that moved in a fluid manner that was dissimilar to the way that I knew spiders walked. It was also fast, as I saw it get closer and closer to Jacobs. Soon it looked like it would be in range to jab one of its legs at the sergeant. Remembering how many of the dead here had limbs cut off from their bodies, I feared that these creatures may have had razor-sharp legs that could easily cut through flesh and bone. Deciding to cover Jacobs as he retreated, I raised my rifle and pointed it at the creature's eye. With it standing tall, I was able to aim it at it without the risk of hitting the 4 men heading my way. Firing a few rounds at it, I managed to hit the creature. However, despite landing hits on it, the eye seemed unfazed. Instead, it took a quick glance towards me before returning its attention back on Jacobs. The eye was clearly tougher than it looked. Unable to stop it or slow it down, I looked down with horror as it closed on Jacobs and extended a leg towards him. In a swift motion, the leg stabbed him in the back and exited out of his chest. The creature then lifted the screaming Jacobs and tossed him to the side, his body impacting the wall before falling on the floor. Then, without failing to stop, the creature continued to move and started heading towards my direction. Realizing that bullets wouldn't be able to stop it, I decided against wasting ammunition on it. There was no hope fighting it. The only way to survive it was to get away. Once the 3 other men had gotten past me, I turned around and joined them. We didn't know where we were going, but we didn't care. As long as we were heading away from the creature, then we would be safe. From behind, I could hear the sound of its sharp legs tapping on the concrete floor as it trained to gain up on us. Never before had I felt fear as the one I experienced at that moment. My mind flashed images of Jacob's getting stabbed by its legs, and I was afraid that I would meet the same fate. I don't know how long we ran, but eventually we reached an area where one hallway intersected another. Staring at that intersection, I saw the silhouettes of a couple of men. Calling out to them as we got closer, I soon recognized Arnold among them. "Fall back," I shouted at him. "Get away." He just stared at me with a stunned and confused expression. Clearly, he and his men hadn't encountered the creature yet. It didn't take long for him to see it though, as I could hear it close behind me. The change on Arnold's face was clear, as I saw him fix his gaze to what was behind me. Without wasting time, he pointed his rifle towards the creature and shouted orders to his men to open fire on it. I wanted to tell him to run away and not waste time shooting at it, but my words were drowned out by the sound of rifle and submachine gun fire that echoed in the hallway. I cursed in frustration at this, knowing that their bullets would do nothing to the creature. However, as we got closer to Arnold and his group, I noticed them cease fire. Turning my head, I looked on in disbelief to see the creature turning around and fleeing from us. Although it did not seem to be injured, the volume of fire Arnold's men had poured out must have been enough to dissuade it from pressing on its advance. I had to remember that although it was strong, it wasn't invincible. The Germans, after all, had managed to kill 2 of them. Conferring with Arnold once we were sure that the creature was nowhere near us anymore, he told me that he had around a squad of his men gathered with him. His other 2 squads were still spread out in other levels of the facility, so he had the platoon sergeant look around for them, while he led the rest to where he had heard gunshots erupting. Due to the complexity of the facility, Arnold and his group got lost and were in the middle of trying to figure out where they were when they ran into my group and the creature that trailed us. Once he was done telling his perspective, I then informed him that we had to get up and out of the mine as soon as we could. The need to inform the battalion commander of the situation was crucial. When he asked about his men that were still spread out in the facility, I regrettably told him that we could only hope that the platoon sergeant could find them and lead them out of here. There was not much that we could do in locating them, and if we stayed here, we would only become targets for the creature. Begrudgingly, he nodded his head. I didn't like the idea either, but our priority at that moment was to inform battalion headquarters of what we had encountered here. Working together, our group cautiously navigated the various hallways as we listened for any sign of the creature nearby. Somehow, after many fearful minutes of wrong turns and shooting at things that weren't there, we managed to reach the large hangar. By then, our group had increased to 20 men, as we gathered some scattered soldiers from 3rd Platoon. I had expected somebody from 2nd Platoon to meet us upon our arrival there, since they surely must have been alerted by the various gunfire. However, what I saw made my heart sink. The creature had gotten there already and it had torn 2nd Platoon apart. Their bodies were strewn all over the hangar, lifeless with some missing limbs. Like the German bodies that we had found all over the facility, they now shared the same fate. I wasn't sure how many of 2nd Platoon remained, but I knew that more than half of them were gone now. Since the various squads were spread out throughout the large room, the creature must have been able to take them out one by one. Unable to form a heavy wall of fire just like we had earlier, the members of the platoon were cut down and left helpless to stop it. This must have been what happened to the Germans in this facility. They were systematically targeted by this being from space. Wasting no time to grieve, I quickly led my remaining men towards the elevator, keeping our eyes wide open We constantly scanned the area as we moved, in case the creature was still lurking nearby. As we reached the base of the elevator frame, one of the men pulled the lever to call it down. At that moment, I couldn't help but wonder for a second. Last time I checked, the platform was already down when it carried the last squad of my group down here. So why was it back up? My question was quickly answered when I saw the open platform lower down with a creature standing on it. I wasn't sure if it was the same creature we encountered before or a second one that had been lurking outside the mine. Whichever it was, the fact that it was outside told me that it must have gone out to attack First Platoon and the Weapons Platoon, which were posted at the mine entrance. This only further demoralized me, as it meant that more of my men had been killed. Staring at the creature as it descended, I watched as it leapt out of the platform before it fully got down. Landing just behind us, the creature immediately stabbed one of its legs before we could even fire a shot. Its attack struck one shoulder and penetrated him right on the chest. As the creature pulled back its leg, the man fell to the ground, before laying flat as blood pooled around him. Letting loose our weaponry against it, we fired everything that we got at it. But even with the heavy torrent that we had placed on it, the creature managed to swing one of its legs and cut off the arm of another soldier. Quickly, he was grabbed and supported by the man standing next to him, but this resulted in a slight reduction in our firepower. Our onslaught against the creature was further reduced when I heard the distinct sound of multiple legs crawling from another corner of the hangar. Looking in that direction, I saw another creature move and rush towards us. Both creatures were now present before us, and I was forced to divide our fire in order to deal with both of them. This meant that the intensity of our barrage was not intense as I would have liked, and I prayed that it would be enough to stave off the two and keep them at a distance. For a while it seemed to have worked, as the one closest to us backed off, while the one further from us had difficulty approaching. I didn't know how long we could hold this line. It was a tense moment, and I could feel my heart beat harder and harder as I watched the creatures try and advance only to fall back. Knowing that our bullets wouldn't be enough to kill these creatures, and having no intention to stay there forever, I gradually pulled back my men, and we slowly backed away towards the elevator platform. As we withdrew, me and Arnold made sure that we kept up a continuous rate of fire against the creatures. We knew that any slackening could open up a gap that would allow them to attack. Slowly but surely, we managed to get on the elevator and gradually rise up from the hangar. As we rose away from the creature, we continued to pour out hot masking fire against them, making sure that they wouldn't hop up onto the platform. Only when we were sure that they couldn't get us did we allow our bodies to relax and crash. Riding the elevator up, we eventually reached the top, where we were greeted by the sight of a heavily armed squad pointing all its weaponry at us. Scanning the faces, I noticed that Jenkins was among them. Moving forward, Jenkins met me halfway and said that he was relieved to see me. Apparently, while we were busy evading the creature in the facility, Jenkins and his group encountered one that emerged from the forest. Rushing towards their position, they fired at it with all they got, but it continued its advance. Upon reaching their position, it managed to kill 2 men from First Platoon before rushing towards the mine entrance. As they chased after it, they watched it operate the elevator and descend down to where we were at. After that, Jenkins informed the old man of what just happened, as he and the group kept careful watch of the elevator. They had assumed that the creature got to us and had massacred my group, so he was relieved to see us get back up. An hour after returning to the surface, the battalion commander arrived within another company. After briefing him of what occurred, he told me to gather my men and have them rest along the nearby tree line. The company that he brought with him will be taking over the duty of guarding the mine entrance. Asking him when they'll be sending a team to go down the mine and secure the facility below, he told me that he won't until further reinforcements arrive. When I told him that I still had men down there, he simply shook his head. Now they're not worth the risk of losing more of my men. Dejected, I kept silent as I watched him walk away. A few hours later, the rest of the battalion arrived, along with a company of engineers that was loaned to us by division headquarters. Armed with flamethrowers, bazookas, and light machine guns, a company from the battalion, along with the engineers, moved into the mine and descended down to the facility. We waited anxiously for the courier that they would send up once the operation was finished. After an agonizing hour, the courier came and said that the creatures were dead. One was killed after being set alight by a flamethrower and finished off by gunfire. The other was killed by a combination of bazooka and light machine gun fire. The price for this result was heavy. Around 30 men were killed. Later on, a new company was sent down to the facility to search for the missing men from my 2nd and 3rd platoons. They were found, but all were dead. For the next few days, we remained in the area, keeping the facility secured. And then 5 days after we had first entered the mine, 3 companies of military police arrived, along with officers from the Office of Strategic Services. One by one, the officers from the OSS visited each company and told us all the exact same thing. The events that occurred in the facility did not officially happen. We were to keep quiet about it, to never tell anyone. If asked what had happened to our units during the past few days, we were to say that we encountered a German resistance pocket in the area and engaged them in heavy fighting. With that, they ended their talk with a threat, saying that any men who spoke of what really happened here would be found and dealt with. We didn't need an explanation to know what he meant. We stayed there for another day before regimental headquarters sent trucks to pick us up. The MPs would be left in charge of guarding the facility, as the OSS officers took over all operations there. As we drove away from the mine, I gave one last glance at it before looking away. Quietly, I prayed that I would never see such horrors like that again. My grandfather left this account in an old notebook. I found the notebook in a box filled with his old things during his military service. After his death last year, I was hoping to make a little article about him online, in order to honor the man my family knew and loved. However, after reading this account, I'm left to wonder if what he wrote was real or not. At first, I found it hard to believe, but after going through his notebook, I found something interesting that made me realize that there must be some truth in what he said. Left between the pages of the notebook was an old piece of paper with German text on it. Translating some of it, it read, "Military encounters with out-of-Earth beings." I knew from the moment the car pulled into the Circle Drive that this place was different. Madame Charlotte's home for wayward children was a spectacular sight. The sprawling mansion lay deep within the forest, far from prying eyes. Despite the gnarled trees surrounding the property and the vines creeping up the siding of the house, it felt inviting, like a new start. Something that I, at only 9 years old, desperately needed. My driver sped away the moment that Madame Charlotte came to greet me. I flipped him the middle finger as he hightailed it down the dirt road. The jerk hadn't said one word to me the whole ride there. I was expecting to be reprimanded when I turned around. Maybe a slap on the wrist. Maybe well, that wasn't very ladylike, as my mother would have said. But instead of receiving a verbal lashing, I was shocked to find that Madame Charlotte was laughing. "Oh, I apologize," she said as her laughter died down. "That was very rude of me. Welcome, Liza. I am Charlotte Winterdown, the headmistress. The children and I have been very excited to make your acquaintance." I gazed up at her. Madame Charlotte was pale as a ghost with long silver hair that tapered off midway down her back. Her eyes were dark and her smile was thin, but it held a warmth that illuminated her features. Madame Charlotte was a good person. I didn't need to be a genius to see that. "Oh, it's getting quite late. I'll help you bring your bags inside. They look much too heavy for one little girl to carry on her own." "Thank you, Madame Charlotte. That stupid taxi driver didn't help at all." Madame Charlotte giggled and then picked up my largest suitcase. "Oh, Liza, I think you'll feel right at home here." We soon found ourselves standing in the foyer. A grand chandelier sparkled above us. I was enthralled by it. My parents had never been able to afford something so fancy. "Millicent, I know you're there. Come greet our newest resident," Madame Charlotte said, folding her arms. Soon, a girl with pallid skin and brown hair tied in braids emerged from around the corner. "I can't get anything past you," she replied with a frown. I stepped forward, extending a hand. The girl looked to be about my age. I was excited at the prospect of meeting a new friend. "Hi, my name's Liza. It's nice to meet you, Millicent." "That's Miss Millicent to you," she said, accepting my handshake and flashing me a grin. I couldn't help but notice her canines. They were abnormally long and looked sharp enough to pierce through metal. "Liza," Madame Charlotte said, "how old do you think Millicent is?" My age." She scoffed, and Madame Charlotte grinned. "Oh, she's 57 years old." My heart dropped. So this woman wouldn't be my first friend after all. "Oh, Millicent is my assistant," Madame Charlotte continued. "She helps with the administrative side of things. As a matter of fact, she handled most of your paperwork. She was instrumental in bringing you here." Madame Charlotte's smile seemed to light up the room. Millicent didn't look so pleased. "Oh, I was just doing my job, nothing more, nothing less. Now, if we're done with introductions, Robert is here to take your bags." A crash resounded from directly behind Millicent. She jumped. "Robert, what the hell? I told you not to bring that." Robert grunted. He held firmly to a luggage cart, his face portraying no emotion. I couldn't help but laugh. Robert turned to me, and it was then that I noticed how unsettling his appearance was. Half of Robert's face and one of his hands were light green. He was hunched over and the smell of spoiled milk had wafted from his strangely colored flesh. He wore a vacant stare that told me that there were no thoughts rattling around in that head of his. "Madame Charlotte?" I said, trying to keep my voice low. "What happened to him?" "Oh, who, Robert?" she replied, loud enough that he definitely heard it. "This is a tragic tale, really. Robert is a zombie. Well, half of one. We believe that whoever he was acquainted with in his previous life was experimenting with a cure. It seems that they were successful and administered it to poor Robert here. It prevented the spread of the infection, but it left him like this." Now he's only capable of following simple commands and responding with guttural noises. He's lucky that we found him. Yeah, real lucky this one, Millicent said, turning her nose up. Rolled a 7 in the game of life. Robert didn't react. Instead, he released a slow, drawn-out fart. The stench was so putrid that it made my nose want to cry. Oh, that is vile, Millicent gagged, covering her nose. Oh, somebody get the gas masks. Once the toxic fumes had cleared out, Millicent instructed Robert to bring my bags to my room while Madame Charlotte gave me a house tour. He did so with a solitary grunt. I could tell that the mansion was big just from looking at it, but descriptions didn't do it justice. Madame Charlotte showed me the main hall, the kitchen, the dining room, the library, the classrooms, the courtyard, and a large playroom with a wide array of toys. I was liking the house more and more by the second. Now, Liza, Madame Charlotte said once the grand tour was nearly complete. She paused, gazing into my eyes. Her grim expression told me that she was about to say something serious. Well, yes, ma'am. You are free to roam anywhere that we have toured today. All other parts of the house are off limits. I cannot stress this enough. You must heed my warning and not wander off. Do you understand? Madame Charlotte's face took on a severity that felt foreign to me. The way that she had flipped from warm and welcoming to cold as ice sent a shiver up my spine. Well, yes, I understand. All right then, she said, her warm smile cracking the icy facade. Let's show you to your room then, shall we? Madame Charlotte led me up a set of stairs into a hallway. This is the children's wing. All children between the ages of 4 and 12 reside here. I have a feeling that you'll fit right in. I smiled at her and I didn't say as much, but I thought so too. Madame Charlotte marched down the hall and stopped in front of a room with an open door. And this is where you'll be staying. It's not much to look at, but you'll get accustomed to it. She then produced a pocket watch from her cardigan and glanced down at the glass vase. Oh, would you look at the time? I must be going now. Important matters to attend to. You settle in and come find me or Millicent if you need anything, dear. And with that, I was left to my own devices. Madame Charlotte was right. The room really wasn't much to look at. It boasted a single bed, a nightstand, a wardrobe, and a lamp. Talk about living the high life. I had begun the process of unpacking what little clothes I owned when the realization hit me. I was missing one of my bags. Panic flooded through me like a tidal wave. Oh, this was bad. Some of my most important belongings were in there. My stuffed rabbit, my grandmother's pendant, photographs of my parents. I couldn't lose that stuff, I just couldn't. Before I could drive myself into a frenzy, a boy around my age appeared in the doorway. He had striking orange hair, vibrant eyes, and he wore a smile that told me that he was a troublemaker. Hi there, I'm Azar. Is this yours? Azar lugged my missing duffel bag from around the corner and plopped it onto the ground. Oh, thank you, I was wondering where that went. Robert probably got confused and took it to the wrong room. It happens a lot. I grinned. That made perfect sense. Azar stood there twirling his hair. I wanted to shoo him away now that my bag was secured, but I didn't want to be rude. So, what are you? I cocked my head to the side. You really have to ask. The hair all over my body should have been a dead giveaway. Azar rubbed the back of his neck. I didn't want to assume, he said, shuffling his feet. His eyes suddenly lit up. Hey, you want to see a cool trick? Not really. Okay, I'll show you. And despite my protest, Azar pointed to his feet. One of the floorboards burst into flames. Seriously, that's why I didn't want to see it. I shouted, racing over and stomping out the fire. While playing Fire Marshal, I felt a presence appear behind me, one that wasn't the boy who had just set my room ablaze. The girl spoke before I saw her. "Really, Azar, again? You're the only one who thinks setting things on fire is cool." I like this girl already. I spun around to find not one, but two girls standing in my doorway. They stepped inside without an invitation. The first one had long red hair and red eyes to match, but that wasn't what made my heart nearly skip a beat, because sitting atop her head was a pair of shiny, pointed horns. The girl's friend was the mere opposite of her. She was pale as a sheet in a white nightgown with long black hair hiding her face from view. She didn't seem very social either. She hid behind the horned girl like a frightened child. The first girl stepped up and introduced herself. "Hi, I'm Astrid, and this is Luna. She's a ghost if you couldn't tell. I see you've met the household idiot," she said, nodding to Azar. He didn't even acknowledge her. He just stared at his feet in shame. "It's nice to meet you, Astrid. And you too, Luna. So, if it isn't rude to ask, are you a devil? I like your horns." Astrid grinned. "Oh, a demon, but close." "And I'm a phoenix," Azar said, standing straight and puffing out his chest. "Nobody asked," Astrid replied. Azar's confidence deflated immediately. His crestfallen demeanor didn't last long, though. After a moment, he got that familiar spark in his eye. "So, Liza, how about you go exploring with us? I bet you haven't seen the fun parts of the house yet." Astrid scowled at him. Though exploring did sound fun, Madame Charlotte's words rang clear and loud in my head. "All other parts of the house are off limits. You must heed my warning." I sighed before meeting Azar's gaze. Maybe another time. I don't want to make Madame Charlotte angry on the first night." "But you won't ever find out, Shut up, Azar, she said no." Astrid's expression softened when she turned to me. "Don't let this moron pressure you into doing anything that you don't want to. My room's right next to yours. If he comes back to harass you, just yell." And with that, she grabbed Azar by the shirt collar and dragged him out of the room. Luna gave me a parting wave before the trio disappeared around the corner. For the next 2 weeks, I stayed on my best behavior. I was grateful to Madame Charlotte and the others for welcoming me so warmly. A small part of me felt like if I acted out, I would get sent to live in a dump, and so I stayed out of trouble. Until Azar visited me after lights out one night. "Psst, Liza, are you awake?" I yawned, pretending to be woken up. "I am now. What do you want?" Even in the darkness, I could see that mischievous passion in Azar's eyes. "You want to go exploring?" I paused. Truth be told, I did want to go exploring, but I wasn't about to tell him that. "I don't know. What if we get caught?" Another voice drifted from around the corner. "Oh, come on, Liza, live a little." Astrid appeared in the doorway, her bright red eyes lighting up the room. "Astrid, you're in on this too? I thought you were against breaking the rules." "Oh, then you thought wrong. I'm a demon, breaking rules is what we do. If you're still not comfortable with the idea, we won't pressure you into it. But Luna and I would be really happy if you came with us." Oh, this was wrong. I knew it was, but I couldn't resist. I shifted my weight to the edge of the bed. "Oh, fine, I'll go. But if we get caught, we're blaming it all on Azar." Astrid smiled. "Fine by me." The house felt completely different at night. The brightly lit hallways had turned to dark, endless corridors where shadows danced and trouble lurked around every corner. Azar led the charge. He seemed confident in where he was going. We managed to sneak past Madame Charlotte's office, through the teenager's wing, and into a hallway with doors on either side. This place was darker than the rest of the house. without any windows to let in the moonlight. I had to wait for my eyes to adjust. "Here we are," Azar said, extending his arms. "Oh, keep your voice down," Astrid spat, jabbing him in the ribs. "Hey, that hurt." "And where exactly is here?" I interjected. All I could see were rows of doors extending into the darkness. They could have led to empty storage rooms for all I knew. "The sea of doors," Astrid replied. "Haven't you heard the rumors?" I had overheard a couple of boys talking about doors in my lessons, but I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. "I don't think so," I said. Whatever," Astrid continued, a smile inching across her lips. "You're about to see for yourself." Azar did the honors, because of course he did. The moment that he pushed open the door, a flood of light illuminated the hallway. It was blinding, but that didn't stop us from entering. Once each of us had stepped inside, the door shut behind us on its own. I was amazed at what I saw. We were standing in an arcade. Rows and rows of endless games hummed their tunes. Lights flashed everywhere. The ticket booth held enough prizes to make any child salivate. I turned to Astrid. Luna was whispering something into her ear. "Got it," Astrid said, turning to us. "Luna says to always keep an eye on the door." I gave her a thumbs up before Azar grabbed my arm and dragged me to a racing game. "Play me, Liza. $1 says that I kick your ass." I glanced around. Astrid nodded. I turned to Azar and my lips melting into a smile. "All right, you're on." A couple hours later, I was $10 richer and ready to get some shut-eye. "Oh, come on, Liza, just one more game," Azar whined. "Give me a chance to win it back, please. That's all the money that I have." "Nope, sorry," I said, heading over to the door where Astrid and Luna stood waiting. "You lost it fair and square." Azar stuck out his bottom lip. "You cheated." "Whatever you say. Maybe I'll give you a shot at winning it back tomorrow." Azar's face lit up. "I can't wait. I'm gonna beat you so bad." I shook my head. "If you say so." With the four of us present and accounted for, we exited through the same door that we had entered from. It hadn't dawned on me before, but in that moment it hit me. Were we the only ones who could see the door? There were plenty of other people in the arcade aside from us, but I hadn't seen a single one pay the thing any mind. I was too tired to put much thought into it. That was a question for another day. The arcade was all that I could think about from then on. Why hadn't Madame Charlotte taken me there on our tour? Was she trying to hog all the fun for herself? It didn't make sense. I dreamt of all the unseen wonders that the other doors were hiding. I didn't have to wait long to find out, because the next night, Azar showed up at my room, a fresh $5 bill in hand. "Hey, this time I won't lose," he said, waving the money in my face. I knew that I wouldn't be able to resist the opportunity to clean him out. A grin inched across my lips. "Oh, you just wait. That $5 has my name written all over it." After picking up Astrid and Luna, we skulked through the house and back to the sea of doors. Azar walked confidently up to the maroon one with a scuffed handle. "This is the one that we went through last night, I'm sure of it." He pushed open the door and there was no arcade. Instead, we found ourselves staring at a public restroom. A chubby man with grease stains on his shirt and toilet paper hanging from his pants waddled into view. "What the hell, Azar? Close it now," Astrid shouted. Azar slammed the door shut, his cheeks flushing with color. "It was the right door, I swear." "Oh yeah?" Astrid said, hands on her hips. "Then why wasn't there an arcade in there?" Maybe we're hallucinating. Let me try again." Astrid didn't even get the chance to tell him off. Azar flung the door open. There was no arcade, but there wasn't a restroom either. This time when the door opened, we were assaulted by the sounds of the rainforest, monkeys screeching, parrots squawking, and a tiger roaring in the distance. We stared at each other gobsmacked. I understood it then. Chances of finding that arcade were slim to none. Azar shut the door, silence permeating through the hallway. What should we do? I asked, studying Astrid's face for an answer. I don't know. Luna whispered something into Astrid's ear. She nodded her head in response. Luna said that we should go back. Azar's face dropped. No, we can find it again. We just have to keep trying. He opened the door to reveal an office space. Then there was a moon-like landscape. The third time he opened it, the door revealed a meadow full of sunshine, rainbows, and puppies. Lots of puppies. Azar nearly closed the door again, but I stopped him. Wait, you can keep your $5. This one looks fun. Astrid looked at the puppies and then turned to Luna, who nodded. Yeah, let's explore this one. Come on, Azar. Don't you want to play with them? Azar sighed, pocketing his money. Yeah, I do. The minute that we walked inside, we were swarmed by dogs. All kinds, too. Labradors, German Shepherds, Schnauzers, you name it. Nearly every breed you can imagine frolicked with us in that meadow. I don't know how long we spent playing catch and fetch, but I loved every second of it. When it finally came time to leave, we were all exhausted. So much so that I almost didn't notice it. The door, it had moved locations. When we had entered, the door had been sitting atop a foothill, but now it was at the bottom of a slope. I considered bringing it up to the others, but I thought better of it. We were all sweaty and tired and had just had one of the best nights of our lives. There was no need to spoil that. At least that's what I thought. Maybe if I had taken what I saw more seriously, I could have saved them from what was to come. Things continued on like that for a few weeks. The four of us would sneak out of our rooms, find a new whimsical world to visit, and sneak back before anybody noticed we were missing. That is, until I visited the Sea of Doors alone. I had lost my favorite scrunchie that night. When I woke up in a panic and realized that I didn't have it at 3 in the morning, I decided to retrace my steps. I thought that maybe I had dropped it in the hallway. I was kidding myself. Deep down, I knew that I had lost it in the world that we had visited, but in my mind, it was worth a shot. I made it all the way to the teenager's wing. When I passed by, a boy had his door open. I tried to sneak past unnoticed, but a voice called out to me. Hey girl. I froze. To me, the teenagers were frightening, almost as authoritative as adults. I couldn't disobey. I walked up to the boy's door and I peered inside. He was sitting on his bed, face obscured by the darkness. I've seen you, you know. You and your little friends think you're so slick. You think nobody's noticed. Well, I have. I froze. I was speechless. I was like you once, carefree. I had friends who took me to the doors. They didn't know, how could they? I was trembling, but I managed to squeak out a response. I'm sorry. Please don't tell Madame Charlotte. The boy didn't reply. I could feel his eyes on me. Eventually he responded, his tone softer. Do you know what happens when you choose the wrong door? No. The boy hung his head. I'll show you. He turned on his bedside lamp, bathing the room in a soft glow. The boy's body was covered in blue scales that shimmered in the light. Kelp green hair fell to his shoulders. From what I could see, he was handsome. And then he turned, The entire right side of his face was a deep, angry shade of red. A ruined eye was buried beneath a mass of swollen flesh that streaked into his hairline. It was twisted and lumpy and wrong. I was horrified. I let out an audible gasp. A tear trickled from the boy's good eye. The thing that did this to me is still out there, still behind one of those doors. You have to stop going there before it's too late. I couldn't find the words to reply. Instead, I did the cowardly thing. I ran away. I ran and ran until I made it all the way back to my room, and then I threw myself in bed and I hid under the covers. I didn't get a wink of sleep for the rest of the night. The next day, I couldn't get the interaction out of my head. Had the boy been telling the truth or had he been trying to scare me? I couldn't think straight. I was on edge during lessons. After class let out, Astrid came up to me. "Liza, are you okay? You don't look so good." I let out a breath. I watched the rest of the kids file out of the classroom, leaving just me and her. "Astrid, I think we should stop, you know." I couldn't say too much. Our instructor was acting preoccupied, but I knew that he was listening. Before Astrid could respond, somebody knocked on the open door. We turned to find Millicent standing in the doorway. "Morning, Mr. C. Mind if I take these two for a second?" Mr. Carter smiled. "Perfect timing. Class just let out." Astrid and I gave each other a nervous glance. We knew that whatever this was about, it couldn't be good. Millicent didn't say a word to us the entire way. The silence was eating me alive. Did she know? Once we had arrived at Madame Charlotte's office, I had my answer. Azar and Luna were seated in adjacent chairs. Madame Charlotte stood behind her desk with Millicent at attention by her side. I had never seen a more frightening look on her face. "Astrid, Liza, take a seat." We followed orders, our heads hung low. "I take it each of you knows why you've been summoned here." No one moved except for Azar. My heart dropped when he raised his hand. "Is it because I stole $5 from Kenny?" I had to resist the urge to facepalm myself. "No, Azar, you are not here because you stole money from Kenneth, but we will address that after the fact, young man." Azar frowned and I shook my head. Astrid was right. He was an idiot. Madame Charlotte continued. "You have been gathered here because a little birdie told me that you've been breaking the rules, exploring parts of the house that are off limits." It immediately clicked. The boy from the night before. He had told on us. Madame Charlotte surveyed each of our faces. I felt so ashamed. I could have burst into tears right then and there. "Not only that, but I'm told that you've been visiting the doors after hours. Is that correct?" I glanced at Astrid. She nodded her head, and the rest of us followed suit. "I am very disappointed in all of you, especially you, Astrid. As the oldest, these children look up to you. I expected better." "Yes, ma'am." Astrid's voice trembled as the words fell out. "Now then, to teach you a lesson, each of you is grounded for the next month. Your free time is hereby revoked. After class, you shall remain in your rooms until dinner is served. Do you understand?" A pit formed in my stomach. Each of us nodded. "Say it aloud." We mumbled in unison, "Yes, ma'am." Madame Charlotte pursed her lips. "Millicent will stand guard in the children's wing overnight until your punishment is lifted. Try anything at all and she will report it directly to me." Millicent's mouth fell open. "But madam, why do I have to watch over them?" A grin tugged at the corners of Madame Charlotte's lips. "Oh, because you're nocturnal, dear. I can't entrust the job to anyone else." Millicent frowned. If she objected, she didn't make it known with anything other than a scowl. Madame Charlotte crossed her arms. "That is all. Return to your rooms and think about what you've done. And we trudged out of her office single file. Azar was the first to get up. Azar, you stay seated. I don't think I've forgotten about your sticky fingers. He gave us a pitiful look as the door clicked shut. When I got back to my room, I cried. Madame Charlotte was disappointed in me, but worse still, I had lost the freedom to hang out with my friends. After I had finally found somewhere that I belonged, I had a feeling that this was going to be a long 30 days. Before I knew it, 2 weeks had gone by. They were two of the most excruciatingly boring weeks of my life, but that was beside the point. I was tossing and turning trying to get to sleep, when a knock on my door made me freeze in place. Miss Millicent? No, dummy, it's me. Me who? Azar. My brows furrowed. Why are you here and how are you here? I thought Miss Millicent was standing watch. In the light emanating from the hallway, I could see a grin form on his face. Well, I overheard Madame Charlotte say that Miss Millicent is away visiting family for the night. She'll be back tomorrow. They left Robert here in her place. A surge of hope jolted through me, until I heard the next words to leave Azar's mouth. Let's go back to the Sea of Doors, just this once. I frowned. No, we can't. What if Madame Charlotte finds out? Oh, she won't find out, you ninny. Besides, even if she does, what is she gonna do? Ground us some more? I'm already grounded for 3 months. I snorted. Well, I've only got 2 weeks left, and I don't want to risk it. Go ask somebody else. Oh, come on. When are we gonna get another chance like this? Think about it. I thought about it. Maybe Azar was right. Miss Millicent was vigilant about making sure that we didn't escape. If Azar really did have 3 months left on his sentence, we wouldn't have another shot at this for a long time. I sighed. Fine, but if we get caught, it's all on you. Azar pumped his fist. All right, I already told Luna and she's meeting us there. Let's go get Astrid. I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could. Azar and I padded down the hall to the room beside mine. Robert was slumped against the wall, snoring loudly enough to wake the dead. Azar and I knocked, and then poked our heads around the corner to Astrid's room. Psst, Astrid, are you awake? Azar hissed. Astrid yawned and sat up. Whatever it is, I'm not doing it, Azar, and go back to bed. Oh, Astrid, don't be like that. Miss Millicent is gone, and this is her chance. Astrid lay back down. No. Astrid, please come with us, I said, hoping to win her over. Just this once, then we'll come back and act like it never happened. Astrid shot up. Her eyes glowed bright red in the darkness. I took an instinctive step back. I said no. Who was Madame Charlotte the most disappointed in when we got caught? Me. I'm the oldest, so I'm in charge, right? No, I'm done. You two can get yelled at without me. Azar and I shared a glance and I sighed. All right, sorry that we asked. See you tomorrow. My heart felt heavy. This wouldn't be the same without Astrid. Azar and I crept down the hall past Robert's unconscious form. I held my nose. His stench was unbearable. Once we made it to the end of the hall, we heard a voice from behind us. Wait, I changed my mind. I'm coming. This time, I made sure that the boys' door was shut when we passed through the teenagers' wing. We moved quiet as church mice. Each of us knew what was at stake. And true to Azar's word, we found Luna waiting for us in the hallway. She instantly floated over to her usual spot behind Astrid. What door should we pick this time? Azar said, poring over these seemingly endless selections. You aren't choosing, Azar, it's my turn, Astrid retorted, and I know which one I want. This one. Astrid pointed to a bright red door. Azar shot her a glance. Fine, but I'm gonna open it. Astrid extended a hand. Go right ahead. The moment that Azar pushed the door open, I knew that Astrid had made the right choice. We found ourselves staring into a crowd of people. Carnival music floated through the air and the smell of corn dogs and funnel cakes beckoned us inside. Azar grinned. He held up a $5 bill. And Kenny should really watch his wallet closer. I bet I can beat you at the ring toss. I smiled. You're going down. We raced around the carnival having the time of our lives. I beat Azar at the ring toss, obviously, and then we lost ourselves in the endless games and rides. At one point, I noted that the door had moved from its original position. It didn't worry me as much as it should have. We would find it when we were ready. I was in line for cotton candy when I first noticed that something was off. The man ahead of me, he looked off, like he was starting to shift. The particles on his clothes phased in and out like he was made of pixels. I studied his Hawaiian shirt. The flowers on the fabric were moving. I froze and glanced around. I noticed it with other people too. Only a few at first, but then it worsened. The crowd began to whir and lag like they were bad CGI in a video game. Suddenly the music went sour. The tents and stands around me began to dematerialize. I thought that I was losing my mind. A deep-seated dread settled within me. This wasn't supposed to happen. Maybe this was what the boy had meant. Maybe we were right to be afraid of the doors. The world began to fade, booths and people melting before my eyes. To my relief, I found my friends close by looking as dumbstruck as I was. In a matter of seconds, it was all gone. Even the ground below our feet had vanished, leaving an endless void of black. All that was left was us, the big tent, and the door. Astrid, what's going on? I managed, but the words came out soft and brittle. I don't know. Before any of us could react, the tent began to morph, the colors shifting. It twisted and writhed and folded in on itself like laundry in a dryer. Before I knew it, something else took its place. An ungodly abomination sat where the tent once was. At first, I thought it resembled a black octopus. The only difference was, this thing had 7 heads jutting from stem-like stalks. Each wore clown makeup. 3 smiled, 2 frowned. One was angry and the other bore no expression at all. My heart dropped, because at that moment I realized something. Something that I should have noticed much, much sooner. The door had shifted to directly behind that creature. All 7 heads started cackling, a cacophony of voices that melded together to form a sinister, desynchronized bellow. Without warning, a tentacle lashed out. Azar unleashed a blast of fire and it shriveled back. To our collective horror, the tentacle began to heal. A second one focused on Astrid. She cast her shadow spell. One of the faces howled in pain. That only seemed to anger the thing. A rain of tentacles shot out from all directions. I had to do it. I knew that I had no other choice. I released a guttural roar as my body began to change. My muscles became more pronounced. My claws grew longer, my teeth sharpened. I could feel the sudden burst of rage coursing through me. Azar's eyes grew wide. I thought you needed a full moon to do that, he said. Nope, just a myth, I replied, swiping a tentacle away. And I thought you were supposed to be a bird. Azar grinned as he shot off more flames. Yeah, fair enough. The tentacles just kept coming, one after another, overwhelming us with their numbers. No matter how hard we fought, we couldn't seem to gain an advantage. If this came down to a battle of attrition, we were going to lose. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, one of the heads spoke.
I know what you did.
My blood turned to ice. A smiling face repeated the words in a sing-song voice.
I know what you did.
Soon the others joined in unison.
I know what you did.
Stop it, just stop. I yelled, slashing harder at the oncoming tentacles. The heads continued one after another.
You're the reason your parents are dead. It's all your fault. You could have prevented it.
Tears fell down my cheeks, soaking into my fur. Stop it, stop it, stop it, please. But the voices kept going.
You knew where your father kept the gun. You could have saved them, but you ran and hid like a coward. They're dead because of you.
I couldn't contain my emotions any longer. I unleashed a roar and a flurry of slashes, battering back the tentacles. I fought in a blind rage, biting, slashing, and slicing up the slimy appendages until I was surrounded by blood and severed flesh. But it was no use. The thing was healing too fast. My heart sank. That boy had been right. We were going to die here. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Luna whispering something into Astrid's ear. Astrid nodded her head and her face hardened. Liza, Azar, listen up. Luna is going to use her curse and we have one shot at this. When I say so, run for the door as fast as you can. The heads responded.
It won't work. You're going to fail. Don't even try it.
Astrid waited for a beat. Now, she shouted, sprinting for the door. The three of us followed behind her. The faces screamed in agony, some unseen force, causing them intense anguish. We ran like the wind, dodging flailing tentacles left and right. Luna was the first to reach the door, followed by me and then Astrid. I should have felt relieved when I made it back to that familiar hallway, but I didn't. Madame Charlotte stood before us. She didn't look angry, just concerned, urging each of us through. Azar was the slowest runner. Luna's curse had almost completely worn off by the time that he came close to the exit. He was almost there, a mere feet away. He made one final lunge at diving to safety, but he didn't make it. A tentacle wrapped around his leg and pulled him to the ground. Dread crashed over me like a tidal wave. This couldn't be happening. Madame Charlotte moved me aside. Children, cover your ears. We did as we were told. Madame Charlotte unleashed a deafening wail. It was so loud that it shook the walls. The beast writhed in pain. Her attack had worked, and the thing let go of Azar. I smiled through the agonizing sound. He was going to make it. He was going to be okay. The beast flailed, its limbs swinging wildly. With one rogue motion, a tentacle had slapped the door and slammed it shut. My eyes grew wide. Shock took over. No one moved for a long time. Madame Charlotte, we have to find him. We have to go back. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Liza. We won't be able to find him. There are millions, if not billions, of possibilities when you open one of those doors. If Azar is going to come back to us, he'll have to do so on his own volition. But there has to be something that we can do. Maybe there's a key. There has to be someone. Astrid cut me off. She stared ahead, a cold, stony look in her eyes. Liza, just stop. We can't help him now. Azar will make it back. I know that he will. Her words hung in the air. Everything went quiet once again. Azar didn't come back that night. Madame Charlotte called me, Astrid, and Luna into her office the next day. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her makeup was a mess. What happened last night was a true tragedy. I blame myself for not keeping a closer eye on you kids. I wanted to shout that it wasn't her fault, that we were the ones who had wandered off, but I stayed quiet. The pain was so fresh that speaking felt agonizing. Madame Charlotte dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief and continued. I should have explained to you the true dangers of the doors. I was naive in hoping that you wouldn't have heard about them. In the past, we have tried implementing various methods to ensure that nothing like this occurs again. The doors cannot be locked. The hallway cannot be obstructed. All camera feeds become grainy and unwatchable. Any attempt to block the doors is undone during the night. Millicent and I have tried everything to rid them from this property, but we have failed at every turn." Madame Charlotte stared at the door to her office. Her face hardened. "It was a young mage who had installed them. His parting gift to us, a curse. I loved that boy like a son, I truly did. But it seemed the more care I showed him, the more that he loathed me. He hated me in this house more vehemently than anything that I've ever seen. That boy broke my heart. And then the day before he had turned 18, he left us the doors. His version of a cruel joke." Madame Charlotte didn't immediately wipe the tear from her cheek. It ran down her face until she was drawn back to the moment that whisked it away. "I was hoping that something of this nature would never reoccur. What happened to Cyrus was horrid enough, but now this." Madame Charlotte pursed her lips. "Under normal circumstances, I would ground you children indefinitely, but I think what you're going through is punishment enough. I'm sorry. Each of you has already suffered more than any child should. No one should have to experience this much loss." A tense silence fell over us. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to be there for her and Luna and Astrid, whose blank stares spoke louder than words ever could. But I said nothing. Madame Charlotte dismissed us from her office. Once the door closed, I heard her break down into sobs. It's been 6 years since then. Despite holding on to a sliver of hope, Azar never came home. Astrid and I gradually grew apart. I think she blames herself for what happened. She grew colder after that day. And we've both since moved to the teenager's wing. I keep my door open every night and sleep with one eye open. That is the burden I must bear. For as long as I live here, I will never let another child walk through those doors. I was headhunted while working as a theoretical physicist for NASA, believe it or not. It sounds like quite a downgrade to transition from studies of alternate dimensions, sitting parallel to our own, to security work. That was what I told the man on the other end of the phone, who called himself Harold Kingston. "Oh, it pays well," he told me. "It may well, but I'm just a little confused," I said. "I don't understand why on earth you would be looking to hire a theoretical physicist for the role of a security guard." "Well, that's just it, Dr. Holden. It's not a security guard vacancy per se. It's a role specifically for an academic of your talents and expertise, though we would have to discuss that in person. There are classified details which cannot be discussed over the phone. That would most certainly make the role far clearer to you. I would like to arrange an appointment for you to meet my colleague, Dr. Thompson, and me." "Oh, I'm not sure," I said. I was starting to entertain the idea a little more, now that I understood Mr. Kingston hadn't mistakenly phoned me up. It had been intentional. His organization had need of physicists. They had need of experts in all manner of research fields, apparently. But I wasn't too keen on leaving my career behind for an opportunity that still seems so vague. "The salary is triple what you're currently earning," Mr. Kingston added. I laughed. "You know how much I make?" "Well, of course, I handpicked you." I wasn't sure why that set me on edge, as I understood the concept of headhunting already. But something about the tone of Kingston's voice didn't sit well with my gut at all. "Is this a legitimate opportunity?" I asked. "Triple my salary, it sounds too good to be true." "Dye Solutions is a government-funded organization, Dr. Holden. And believe me when I tell you that the American government is extremely invested in the work that we're doing." He paused. "If you simply meet us for an appointment, you'll see all of this for yourself." Triple my salary. I told myself that I would be a fool to not at least meet the man and hear what he had to say. He forwarded the details to my email and I went to the specified location. Seeing the building in person did slow my rapid heartbeat, at least somewhat closer to a normal rate. It was not some back alley warehouse, but a multi-floored, glass-paned building. There is a large marble wedge on the main lawn, with a metal plaque affixed to its front reading, "Dye Solutions." I started to feel quite giddy as I went inside, and dreaming of the way in which a tripled salary taking me well into six figures could entirely transform my life. I didn't stop to think on what I would be doing. I just assumed it would be the same work that I had been performing for NASA. Only my harebrained ideas about other worlds might be taken marginally more seriously here, given the significant bump in pay. "Dr. Holden," I told the receptionist, a fair-haired young woman. "I'm here for the third floor," she interjected. "Room 17A. "Right, thank you." I went to the lifts to the side of her desk, impressed already by the efficiency of this place. The receptionist was so on the ball as to anticipate my needs before I'd even finished my sentence, and that had to spell good things about the running of this place. But why was there still a churn in my stomach as I awaited the arrival of the lift? I wondered, why did I still feel as I had during the initial phone call with Harold Kingston? That something about this Dye Solutions building, and perhaps even the people working for it, sat at odds with normalcy. Why was something in my very being screaming at me to run? I made it to the third floor and I was startled into the back wall of the lift as the doors opened, revealing a white-haired man standing and smiling broadly back at me. "Oh, sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to scare you, Adam. I'm Harold and we spoke on the phone." I steadied my breathing and chortled at myself and the old man joined in. "An embarrassing first impression," I said. "Oh, not at all. In fact, it might be better to get it all out of your system now." My smile faded as I exited the lift and followed the old man up the hallway. Get it all out of my system? What did he mean by that? Kingston opened the door to 17A, and he sat me at a table opposite a middle-aged woman with the beginnings of gray hair whom he sat beside. "This is Dr. Elise Thompson. I mentioned her over the phone." Elise stuck out a hand and smiled as I took it. "Pleasure to meet you, Dr. Holden. I'm looking forward to us working together in the facility." "And the facility?" I asked. "Oh, the facility will be your workspace," Kingston answered. "You'll be providing security solutions for Elise and the other members of your team, based on your findings." "My findings?" "Oh yes. We've been reading through your papers on other dimensions over the past few years. Fascinating work, Dr. Holden. Genius work, dare I say. You ought to feel quite accomplished." I scoffed. "What, working for peanuts as a glorified grunt in a cramped office?" "Yes, well, NASA didn't appreciate your talents, but we will if you choose to work for us." I must admit the salary certainly suggests that I would be appreciated. More appreciated, at least. But I'm still confused about the nature of the job opportunity. I'll be providing security solutions based on my expertise in the field of alternate realities. And that just sounds like nonsense, if you'll forgive me for saying so. Kingston and Elise chuckled. "Oh, I forgive you," he said. "It sounded like nonsense to me too when I first joined the organization 20 years ago. They told me all about the facility, but I believed in none of it until I saw the place for myself. I'm going to need you to do the same, Adam. I'm going to need you to suspend your disbelief." I shrugged. "I'm an open-minded man. Clearly, you've read my papers, so that should come as no surprise to you." Kingston smiled more broadly and then looked to Elise. "I told you this was the right man for the position." "Well, let's give Dr. Holden the chance to decide that for himself, shall we?" Elise asked. "Go on, sir, give him the lay of the land." "The facility. began Kingston, pausing to inhale, is another world. It sits parallel to ours. It is the type of dimension about which you have theorized for your entire career, Dr. Holden. It is real, and I want you to help study this place, bring some reason to the madness, and in turn perhaps help to protect your colleagues who are working down there. I paused for a moment. I measured my response. I could see from the faces looking back at me that Kingston and Elise were nervously awaiting my ridicule, but I didn't laugh or scoff or call them liars. And it wasn't just the staggeringly high salary that prevented me from doing so. It was logic. If they were lying, I would find out soon enough. Why go to all this trouble to intentionally tell a lie? What could they possibly gain from it? I had little money. I suppose even my middle-aged body had somewhat decent organs that these two might hack out of me and sell on the black market. But this was all too elaborate an operation to be a scam. I believed what they were telling me. I knew that much. But it didn't, of course, mean that they were right. I decided that was perhaps why they had sought me out. Perhaps I was here to crush their dreams and tell them that they had not, in fact, discovered a parallel reality. I had theorized about such things, based on studies on particles that defied current understandings of physics. But I had dealt with so many naysayers over the years that I barely believed in the concept of other worlds myself. Still though, I couldn't miss out on the opportunity of at least securing a decent salary for myself, working for this government-funded agency before it no doubt imploded. Once senators in Congress realized there was no merit to funding a fantasy. Are you saying that I had the job? Should I accept now? I asked. I am, Kingston answered. And how soon will I see this facility? The old man pushed a piece of paper across the desk. As soon as you sign this, he said. And before me on the surface lay a strangely sparse NDA. It was far too limited in its number of clauses, and those clauses were worded in vaguely threatening ways, suggesting that whistleblowing would be the very last thing that I would ever do with my life. It was another red flag atop the many, many other red flags since I had first taken the phone call from Harold Kingston less than a week earlier. But I was a foolish man in his late 30s, thinking only of the sickeningly high salary and the life of finery that awaited me. Should I play my cards right and stretch out this work opportunity as long as was feasible? But first, I would have to play along and pretend to be impressed by whatever nonsensical evidence of a parallel universe that Dye Solutions had found and called the facility. Harold and Elise got up and led me out of the room, and I was driven madder by curiosity than I ever had been by any other scientific or personal endeavor in my life. These two had insisted that I would essentially be working security, and I had laughed at the notion. They hadn't. Am I not a little overqualified for a security role? I asked. No, answered Kingston. Not for this kind of security work. I told you, Dr. Holden, you're going to be doing more than watching surveillance footage. You're going to become the expert on the facility. We'll give you the knowledge and experience that we've spent years building, and you're going to give us your mind in return. You're here for your expertise. You'll be conducting experiments on a daily basis to ensure the safety of our teams in the various areas of the facility that we've mapped out over the past 22 years. I still don't really understand the facility that I'm supposed to be guarding, I said. How does my expertise come into play here? Oh, I suppose the word facility might be throwing you off. Kingston led us to the lift and pressed the button, and we waited quietly for a few moments. You'll understand when you see it for yourself, said Elise. And that is where you're taking me now, right? It is. I smiled. It's just a relief to know that I got the job. No, you were never at risk of failing the interview, Dr. Holden. Whether you got the job was always in your hands. Now you've signed the NDA, that's it. You work for us here at Dye Solutions. We went in the lift, and Kingston pressed the B button for the basement floor. And there's no need to be so nervous now, Dr. Holden. I'm not nervous about the job. No, but you are nervous about the facility. I frowned. That wasn't quite right, and Kingston clearly realized that. Sorry, he said. What I mean to say is that you're nervous because you don't believe in the facility. I went pale, watching the numbers on the lift screen disappear down to 1, and then 1 became B. I stammered as the doors opened. I don't. It's okay, Adam, said Elise, motioning for me to follow as she clambered out of the lift. We were all the same when we first started here. None of us believed. I followed her out of the lift alongside Kingston. So you both keep saying, it has to be seen, right? Right, Kingston replied. The pair took me down a mostly unlit hallway to a nondescript door, guarded at either side by 2 men in black security attire. Their rifles affixed to their fronts caught me a little off guard. This seemed like an excessive defensive measure, and it begged the question of what security work I would be doing. Yes, Kingston kept telling me that my job title was a little misleading in a traditional sense of security work, as my role would involve scientific studies of some kind. But here were 2 men that seemed to be doing a perfectly suitable job of securing this facility, all with the traditional method of deterring would-be intruders with firearms. Kingston nodded at the 2 men, and then opened the door onto a room. But to call it a room was a stretch. It was little more than a storage cupboard, cleared out of whatever else it had once housed, given the carpet's indents, forming the telltale lines and holes of rather ordinary shelving units or boxes. It was a disappointing room. There was nothing in there, and I almost wanted to ask whether this whole thing had been a joke all along. But I was no moron, and I didn't want to lose out on such a well-paid opportunity. This was still the initiation phase of my employment, and I feared that stepping out of line in any way might still lose me the job, no matter what they said about it already being mine. I was almost certain that this had to be some manner of test. Obviously, a cleared-out cupboard was not the facility that they had kept discussing. It clearly wasn't the space that I would be guarding, as the job was being performed perfectly well by those 2 men on either side of the open door into it. But if 2 men were really needed to look after a tiny empty cupboard, then that dampened my hopes for Dye Solutions being a reputable organization, and it certainly did not bode well for the facility being an interesting place. But then Kingston marched ahead of Elise and me, striding towards the far wall of the storage cupboard. It took him only 2 steps to cross the entire room, and then he was gone. Gone. He had vanished before my eyes. I let out a scream as I came to terms with what I had witnessed, and Elise held my shoulder and tried to settle me. It's okay, she said. It's okay, just walk through the wall. I'll be right behind you, it's safe. I spent a minute or so collecting my breathing, and Elise did pressure me again. She stood there silently holding my shoulder as if to steady my footing and stop me from collapsing. She was absolutely giving me a moment, no doubt about that. She had once stood in that exact same position, perhaps having a panic attack much like my own as she came to terms with the fear gripping her entire body and mind. And she and I certainly couldn't be the only ones to find ourselves in this predicament. Kingston had been there too by the sounds of it. He had mentioned other colleagues in the facility. The facility. Was that what lay behind the wall? I hated myself for that pondering question, because it meant that I was coming to terms with something that ought to have been impossible. A man walking through a wall. And then I thought of what Kingston had said about the facility being another world. Dye Solutions was looking for the best of the best in all scientific fields. They were looking for theoretical physicists such as me. They were dealing with a realm of science beyond public understanding. Whatever I had just witnessed was not a feat of magic. but a science problem of some kind. It wasn't impossible. I just didn't understand it yet. Maybe it had something to do with parallel realities, or maybe it didn't. But either way, I had been brought here to find out. The staggeringly high salary made sense. I summoned a deep breath and walked forwards. Passing through the wall felt like breaking a pool's surface. It was the only proof I had that this wall was not some holographic trickery set up by my new Dye Solutions colleagues to play a practical joke on the new hire. Of course, I still told myself that there could be a hoax or a scam at play, even if I hadn't quite pieced it together yet. But what I saw on the other side of that wall put all my doubts to bed. Ahead of me stood Harold Kingston in an endless hallway. Whether it was truly endless or not remains an unanswered mystery to this day, but I knew the distant horizon was a pinprick, where the walls and ceiling and carpet met at a center point. This hallway stretched for miles. I was sure of it, and that surely ruled out this all being some elaborate hoax, for I couldn't see why the government would fund Dye Solutions to dedicate so much time and so many resources to building a gargantuan underground place. Yet somebody clearly had built it. This place. This strange place. "Welcome to the facility," Kingston said. Dr. Elise Thompson emerged at my side, having slipped through the wall behind me. "Hurts your eyes, doesn't it?" she asked meekly, having lost all the confidence that she had in our conversation on the other side of the wall. You'll get used to it." "It hurts my ears more," I said. "What is that noise?" An obnoxious buzz came from all around. It seemed to ooze from the far distance of this infinite hallway, stretching far past the outer limits of the Dye Solutions building, ridding me of the notion that this was all some elaborate physics trick. But it also oozed from the odious yellow wallpaper at either side of the hallway patterned with arrows, and it oozed from the similar yellow carpet below our feet, with a sour smell and an eclipse of moss swelling in the air around a clump that they had chewed out. But Kingston's thumb jabbed up at the fluorescent lights wedged into the gray ceiling tiles overhead, and humming like 1,000 shrieking bees, it certainly seemed that the buzz was coming from them. For the shrieking sound poured the loudest out of each ceiling light that we walked beneath, but the sound was coming from all around. It was oozing out of junctions that we passed on our left and right, spilling out into other rooms and equally infinite corridors. There were things in the depths of this place, the facility creating the awful noise, I realized. I wanted to tell Kingston that I was talking about more than the shrill sound from the fluorescents. I was talking about the all-encompassing wall of sound, like untold people screaming from all directions of this ceaseless place. But I was too afraid of his answer, because I was sure nothing in this place would make sense, and it was why I was so sure that Dye Solutions had not built it. The absurdist architecture of the facility was enough to drive me to near lunacy within minutes. We turned left and right and left again, down maddening hallways of walls standing at odd angles to one another, and strange ceilings that tilted precariously to one side, and even a cupboard built into the floor at one point. There came a muffled sound from beneath it, and I came to a stop before it, staring down at the wooden doorway built into the carpet. Its doorknob rattled and I jolted backwards. "Move," said Kingston. "Now." I didn't need to be told twice, and judging by how hurriedly Elise and Harold pushed downwards, this was again no joke. We scurried down more lefts and rights until I was sure that I wouldn't be able to find my way back without them. But I was just glad to be away from that horrid cupboard in the floor, and whatever thing lay in wait on the other side of it, rattling its handle and praying for somebody to let it out to the other side. It. I don't know why I was thinking of it as an it. I don't know why I was thinking of the facility as some other world. It seems insane that I should have bought Kingston's story at face value, doesn't it? But you weren't in that place. You didn't feel it. There was something wrong with it. And I started to consider as we worked our way into its yellow depths that the facility had not been built at all. Sure, it had the appearance of the back rooms of some dated inner-city office, missing on the appropriate desks, computers, shelving units, and other corporate furnishings. But it wasn't a place that made sense. Even if one were to overlook the absurd interior design, it was impossible to overlook the sheer scale of the place. It was too big. Not just too big for Dye Solutions to have built. It was too big for anyone to have built. And as the air started to feel hot and heavy upon my skin, I asked whether we ought to be wearing protective gear in this place. "Oh no, we're fine," Kingston said with a chuckle, and then he gave me an awful smile, much as he had when we stepped out of the lift, while Elise gave me one that seemed far more human and grounded. I had the sense that she hadn't been working here too long, in the grand scheme of the facility's history, and I wondered whether people working in this place as long as Kingston might be driven similarly mad. We passed down one final corridor with fluorescent lights and ceiling tiles built into its floor, and carpet built into its ceiling, and then we exited into a large room. It had a little more breathability than the other corridors, and I was thankful to see people, men and women in overall suits and lab coats, walking about the place. The room was filled with their equipment, ridding the eerie and unnatural ambience from what had likely been another yellow void before Dye Solutions had arrived in this place. "These will be your working quarters," said Kingston, as he pointed to a windowed room at one side of the yellow room. Its glass panes were ever so slightly off, sitting not quite horizontally in the wall. And that told me this room had been designed by the maker or makers of the facility, rather than Dye Solutions. You see, Dye Solutions had a human touch to their work, and I knew the difference between the two. One gave me nausea, and the other gave me a little respite. But I couldn't stop thinking about that cupboard a few hundred yards back. "What was that under the floor?" I asked. There was knocking and rattling, and "It'll be far from the strangest thing you see in here," interrupted Kingston. But it's the sort of thing you'll be keeping an eye on, Dr. Holden." I sighed. "Right, security work. But there's a reason you hired me in particular, right? You think my scientific expertise will come in handy with understanding this place." "This other world," Kingston said. I didn't want to agree with him just yet, but my gut already did. But the logical cogs in my head were trying desperately to explain it all, perhaps to keep me from screaming or passing out, for we weren't built to understand such things as other worlds. I was a theoretical physicist. Theoretical. I was never supposed to see one of my parallel universes, about which I had written so many papers in reality. I had never truly believed. Now I did. Kingston left me with Elise, who took me into our office and showed me the ropes. On a monitor were the camera feeds of an elaborate surveillance system, keeping tabs on all the rooms mapped out by Dye Solutions, and in documents strewn messily about the desk were the beginnings of scientific ideas from the previous physicist who had been working on coming up for explanations for the physical anomalies in the various rooms. "The walls shift," explained Elise, pointing at the documents. "And that was what Dr. Peter Accrington believed. He's the one I'm replacing." She nodded and continued, pointing at the documents again. "Layouts change daily, sometimes hourly. There are strange forces at play." "I feel it already," I said. "In the air. This isn't Earth. I don't feel right here." "Oh, I'd say that feeling gets better, but it doesn't," Elise said. "And you'll see more anomalies that make it harder and harder to believe there's a scientific explanation for all this. But you're the physicist, not me." "What sort of things did this Dr. Accrington see?" I asked. "Oh, gravity sometimes plays by different rules," she said. "And sometimes employees working in these facility rooms find that they don't need to eat or drink water for days. People have died on the job in a myriad of ways over the past 20 years. That's why minds like yours are so important, Adam. Dr. Thompson, I mean. The previous man in your role, Accrington, thought that there must be some explanation for all this, and spent years trying to make sense of it all, as he thought we could do a better job of protecting the team if we could learn to predict this, while unpredictable plays. He always said we needed more minds that could make sense of these unearthly laws of physics. He was getting close to an answer, he claimed, but Elise paused. He went missing while exploring a room in the northeast wing. It's an expanse of holes and a carpeted floor leading to black pits that, well, it might harbor all sorts of horrors. My eyes widened. He fell down one of them. He died on the job. What had I signed up for? We don't know, Elise said. The camera feed never showed what happened to him in that room. He entered it but then just vanished. You'll come to see that things in this place make no sense, Dr. Holden. Or the man-made instruments we use are just inept at making sense of them. She tapped the monitor. I nodded. Well, we're operating in a new realm of science. I shook my head, scolding myself for talking like them. Theoretically. Of course, Elise smiled. Scientific skepticism is crucial. Listen, I believe you. I believe there's something not right about this place. I believe that it seems infinite, and maybe it wasn't built by dissolution, and maybe the air and the design and everything else seems wrong. But that doesn't mean there's not a rational explanation. Elise repeated herself. Well, of course. I sensed she was holding back. But, well, I thought the same when I started working here 2 years ago, she said. I'm a different person now. This place doesn't just change its design each and every day. It changes people too. I wasn't so sure about that, but I agreed to do my best to fill the role of Dr. Accrington. I agreed to study this place and carry on the physicist's work of trying to understand the patterns of the rooms, so as to better protect the team. I asked why she hadn't stepped into the role, and she explained that she was a doctor of chemistry. She served a very different purpose down there. Every crew member had an individual purpose. Mine was security, come to understand the patterns of the rooms. Dr. Accrington was sure the facility could be broken down into its constituent parts and turned into something predictable, and then no more crew members need ever get lost or go missing again, even when exploring new and unmapped areas of the facility with unprecedented dangers. I looked over Accrington's many notes. Within them were a ton of scribblings from the mad scientist I feared I was destined to become. And I knew very early into my employment that I had made a mistake, but there was no way back. The NDA had made it quite clear that this was a job for life. To leave in anything other than a body bag was an impossibility that terrified me into compliance. I spent those early weeks watching team members explore various rooms, some already mapped and others newly discovered. They were collecting air samples in the case of Elise's subteam, or digging away carpet and wallpaper to see what lay beyond. And as the days went by, I saw what Elise had promised. Walls in the facility would shift and change. Objects would phase in and out of places. In one room, a chair would sometimes slip through a wall, but return to its original spot 12 hours later. I saw what the previous physicist had meant. There were patterns to be observed, and science is nothing but making sense of observable patterns. But this was, of course, nothing like the theoretical papers on parallel dimensions that I had written over the past decade. I had spoken on particles behaving in peculiar ways, of course, but to see it with my own 2 eyes was quite another thing. The more I tried to explain, the less that I understood. I articled hypotheses about quantum entanglement and submitted them to Kingston, and he told me to keep working towards understanding the predictable nature of the rooms. Mostly, I simply tried my best to catalog the repeating anomalies I noticed in the data. so as to better warn my colleague of the dangers they faced in certain rooms and hallways. I saved one man from falling through a temperamental patch of carpet, and I helped one young woman navigate through a hallway with different gravitational fields along its length. But accidents happened. Thankfully, they were always whenever I wasn't on shift, but referring to them as accidents never made them any less horrifying to my ears. People were going missing, and usually the most nervous and unstable on the team. "Oh, they got scared off and quit," was always Kingston's explanation. "We'll track him down." But I didn't believe that. I didn't think that they had quietly resigned and hid away in the real world. I thought they were stuck in the facility somewhere. It was after 6 months and several more disappeared colleagues that I started recommending the hazmat suits. The commonality in the lead up to every disappearance was erratic behavior, and my working hypothesis was that the air of this facility was different from ours back in the real world. On the other side of that wall into the dissolution storage room. Elise had already been studying air samples for years, of course. She told me that they knew they were missing something, but the data wasn't helping them out. The air contained oxygen, nitrogen, argon, carbon dioxide, and other trace gases. But those gases were like none on Earth. This was, for the most part, the same as our air back in the real world. But there was something in there which made no sense. It wasn't some particulate or pollutant, as we might get back in our normal atmosphere, but something for which the machines of dissolutions couldn't understand. And I was keen to test out whether correlation and cause might marry after all. The disappearing colleagues were always long-term employees. They were all people who had spent around 5 continuous years working in the facility, judging by my cross-reference data. We were inhaling something that was driving us mad. I didn't want to overstep my realm of scientific inquiry, but Elise thankfully agreed with me. We petitioned the hazmat suits, and Harold Kingston begrudgingly agreed, and what we found certainly supported my data. Workers' mindsets certainly improved after donning the hazmat suits with oxygen tanks. I certainly had far more mental clarity afterwards, but Kingston always refused to wear one himself. He talked about how he had spent 20 years working in the facility, and he hadn't gone mad and disappeared into its depths. He said that disproved my hypothesis, and that I would see. Those employees were safe and sound somewhere in the real world, and his men would find them. Of course, I found it debatable that Harold Kingston was fine. Something about the man had unsettled me since our very first meeting. He was an uncanny chap. Was that just his nature, or had he been changed after 2 decades of inhaling the facility's air? I wasn't sure. It was after a year of working down there that it happened. Elise and Harold went missing. I hadn't been on shift when it happened, so I scoured the footage and found that Elise and Harold had simply vanished into thin air in the room of holes, where Dr. Accrington and so many other dissolution employees had disappeared over the decades. And just as had been reported with Dr. Accrington's disappearance, Elise and Harold did not trip and stumble down one of those holes. They simply ceased to be. They were on the cameras as our boss led her into the room, and then they were both gone. And that was when, as I studied the camera feed around the time of their disappearance, I noticed something almost imperceptible. 2 of the holes had darkened into absolute blackness, as if they were no longer full of shadows, but in absence, or perhaps I realized it was quite the opposite. 2 people had vanished into thin air. 2 holes had darkened with their swallowed souls. I was starting to sound mad myself, so I checked the oxygen tank on my hazmat suit, found that it was fine, and put my face in my hands. I wept for Elise. She and I had become close, too close perhaps. I should have maintained a degree of professionalism and separation. I realized in that moment that I had fallen in love. Fool that I was. So I got to my feet and went out to the room of holes, watched by a few timid colleagues from the doorway. None were keen on stepping foot in that room, which had caused 3 of their colleagues to vanish already. They looked at me as if I were driven to insanity by that strangeness in the air, which had affected their coworkers. But it was Elise who had driven me to this insanity. It wasn't some sense of justice. It wasn't some hero who would have bravely gone in search of any fallen colleague. It was Elise. I had to save her. I wasn't thinking clearly. I don't remember fetching a rope or having any sort of plan as to how I would venture down one of the black holes. The room made the decision for me. My vision filled with blackness and I was falling, tumbling down a void, hearing the screams of the dye solutions workers tumble down after me. And then I was lying softly against a hard floor. I had not clattered to it, I had drifted to it softly, as if plucked from one place and laid gently in another. I rose to my feet and found wet tiles beneath, stretching towards a pool that stretched off around a corner, like those maddening yellow hallways up above. But this place was different. Was it still the facility? It had to be, because it gave me that same feeling of wrongness. Now it was a mirage of a swimming center rather than an office space, but elements of that facility above it seeped in. I saw a hallway of yellow carpet leading off from the tiles behind me, and so I followed it. It was not a route picked out carelessly or at random. There was a trail of wet footprints across the carpet. It had to be a sign of Harold Kingston and Dr. Elise Thompson. I followed this wet trail of footprints across the carpet and into another room, covered in tiles, across its floor, walls, and ceiling, with only scant light spilling inside from fluorescents in the carpeted hallway. I didn't step into the room. I was frozen in fear to the spot, because there was a man standing in it, a man that I recognized. "Harold," I whispered. Kingston was standing and staring at the tiled wall facing away from me, and I realized there was a thin sheet of water trickling down those tiles from a gap between the wall and the ceiling. My boss seemed to be mesmerized by it at first, but then I couldn't see his face. For all I knew, he was staring blankly at the tiles ahead, not a thought in his head at all. "Where's Elise?" I asked. "Sir." He finally turned and I screamed. Kingston's face was gone. The old man clawed at the blankness where his facial features should have been, now covered in flat and pale skin, and he started to stumble blindly towards me. But as he went, his stumbling stopped and he found a calm and measured stride. He was walking directly towards me. Even without eyes, he could find me. I turned and ran left, followed the carpet to a hallway of slick tiles, which nearly brought me flat to my face as I skidded across them. There were fewer lights with every turn I made, but I was guided instead by occasional smears of blood on the tiled walls of the corridors. A trail of handprints led me deeper into the dark. And then I came to the worst of the rooms. Lit by a solitary ceiling fluorescent was a pool in the center of another tiled room. And in that pool was a young woman, her head being forced underwater by a nude, bald man. "Elise!" I cried out, and the man turned to face me, revealing that he was like Kingston, with no features on his face. He was an undressed toy doll, creating friends to join him. That was the most sense that my logical mind could make of it all. And as he let Elise come up for air, I saw her lips drip off from her face, as if washed away by the water. She was trying to scream, judging by the tautness of the flesh on the bottom half of her face, and the wild look in her eyes as she turned to look my way. And those eyes were starting to drift down her face too, washed away by whatever the water had done to her, as if she were a smudged watercolor portrait. The nude, faceless being took hold of Elise again and giggled, muffled behind its face flesh as he dunked her under the water again. Like a child playing a game, and she was his toy doll after all. I saw her nose and eyes drift up to the surface in bubbles and float away, watching me as they disappeared into the darkness of the room. There came a hand on my shoulder, and I was spun to look into the faceless face of what had once been Harold Kingston. He was what Elise was about to become. The old man's lower jaw stretched, screaming something at me as I screamed back at him with my lips still intact. I think he told me to run, but regardless, that was what I did. Whether Elise was beyond saving or not, I didn't intend on staying to find out. I wanted to live. I wanted only in that moment to live. "I'm sorry," I croaked at her, turning on my heel. I scampered through the maze of tiled floors and carpets, and desperate at first for a way out, but then desperate simply to get away from the wet slabs of flesh against the tiles in the distance. That nude thing, which had stolen the faces of Elise and Harold, it was coming for me next. I wasn't sure if there was any way back to the facility floor above. I was trapped down there. I made it back to the initial tiled room beneath the room of holes, expecting to find nothing but a blank ceiling overhead, but instead looking up into light at the ceiling to find a rope that had been lowered down towards me. I grabbed it and started to slink my way up. My head started to ache and pound as I ascended into the blackness. These tunnels between floors had never been built to be traversed by mortal things. Perhaps I finally accepted that they had never been built at all. Building a thing was a notion reserved for the real world. The rooms abiding by whatever fractured laws of physics governed the facility as a whole were places that simply existed. There was no method to the madness. That was my final scientific conclusion. I felt a tug on the rope as I climbed and looked down to see a fleshy creature following me up it. With a scream, I hurried my ascent, seeing the mask of a hazmat suit above, and weeping behind my own mask as I envisioned this creature dragging me into the depths and drowning me to wash away my face. But I made it. I made it to the room at the top and was heaved out of the hole that I had climbed into by two men in hazmat suits. They screamed alongside me as we saw the nude, faceless shape scuttling up the rope nearing the room. We had given it a way out of its den. But I snatched the rope from my savior's hands and tossed it down the hole, watching the creature plummet to its depths, back to the pool rooms where Elise and Harold were fated to forever wander alongside it, faceless and forgotten. I left Eye Solutions shortly after that, and I've been in hiding ever since. They threaten me even now that they'll end my life for leaving them behind, given all the classified